My great kingdom of Italy. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Preparation. Our contacts with the British have been smooth, and London is very supportive of our actions. Prime Minister Gladstone told us that no matter what happens, the United Kingdom is on our side. In the Prime Minister's office, Gambetta, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, is reporting the latest developments to Prime Minister Jaffelli, and beside him is General Laurent, the Minister of Army representing the military. What about the German side? Ruefully was not satisfied with the good news and continued to ask about Germany's attitude. At present, only Britain and Germany can have an impact on France's march into Tunisia, and he needs to eliminate these two possible unfavorable factors faced with the Prime Minister's inquiry. Ruefully, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, spoke. We have not yet contacted the German side. Special Envoy Lomanc only sent a telegram yesterday. He plans to take a train to Berlin today. But based on our understanding of Prime Minister Bismarck, he should be very happy to support us. Bismarck's attitude has been understood throughout France over the years, and he pays attention to a balance. Of course, the balance is also based on German interests. This Prime Minister, who has made great contributions to Germany, has only done one thing in recent years, and that is to avoid Germany's diplomatic isolation. Therefore, whether it is to win over Austria-Hungary or to stabilize France, Russia, and Britain, it will buy Germany time to develop. Point of course, other countries are not fools, but this person is very capable and can always find conditions that satisfy both parties. Of course, his career was not perfect, and it was not his will that William II later asked him to retire. But after the development of German capital, his method was not popular enough. But now, under its leadership, the big German ship is cutting through the waves and moving forward bravely. Ruefully is not unclear about this person, but of course there are some things that people have to recognize. The facts: after Germany was unified, its population, territorial resources and other aspects were superior to France. He was not a reckless man like Clemenceau, who only knew how to keep shouting slogans of revenge. If France's national power cannot overwhelm Germany, what will it do to take revenge? Just rely on slogans. In his opinion, France currently has less potential than Germany in terms of territory, people, and economy, so it needs to find another way and find a solution from the colonies. Competing with Germany is not conducive to France at all. Only by relying on colonies can France quickly increase its strength point, and compared with Europe, which can affect the whole body with a single move, Asia, Africa and Latin America are not only weak and conducive to colonization, but also lack those constraints, which is simply the best choice to enhance France's strength. As long as France has enough colonies, even if it can only mobilize 1/3, it will be enough to deter Germany. By that time, it would not be too late to talk about recapturing Alsace and Lorraine. A qualified politician must have enough patience. How could he be so reckless and directly trigger hostility between the two countries like Clemenceau? This is not the behavior of a wise man. Therefore, Ruefully pays attention to planning and then acting. Killing with one blow. Either don't activate it, or you must kill the enemy once it activates. This was the lesson he learned from the Franco-Prussian War. Fortunately, the iron-blooded Prime Minister at that time miscalculated France's strength and only took away 5 billion francs, which did not cause fundamental losses to France. Otherwise, France would still feel breathless now. Of course, he couldn't forget such hatred unless Germany offered enough benefits to resolve this grudge. However, as far as he knew, the Germans had been immersed in the pride of defeating France and had no such idea at all, so there was no way he could help it. France is hostile to it. Since the time of Louis XIV, France has been the #1 army in Europe. It has never been afraid of anyone in land warfare. This is recognized by all European countries from Louis XIV to Emperor Napoleon. Therefore, the temporary defeat cannot affect the French people. They will definitely once again prove that France is the best army in Europe. Of course, it is best to bury this kind of hostility in your heart and stop shouting verbally. Having said so much, we must focus on the present, and Rouffari now also needs to focus on the action against Tunisia first. So after Foreign Minister Gambetta finished speaking, he immediately asked the military representative on the side, General Laurent, Minister of War, how are your military plans prepared? We are already prepared. Faced with the Prime Minister's inquiry, General Laurent, a military representative, immediately answered. And what he said is true. As early as after the Berlin Conference, the French military had made plans to invade Tunisia. Of course, the plan at that time was not suitable for the current situation, but it still has huge reference value. After the Prime Minister made it clear that he was preparing to invade Tunisia, the military immediately prepared a battle plan that conformed to his ideas. After the military's tireless work, the plan has been initially completed. General Laurent took out a combat map marked with various military symbols, spread it out and said, at present, our country has made a military plan, and this is the operational map of the plan. Prime Minister, please take a look. This is a military map with a ratio of 50,000 to 1. Our current plan is to use the terrain of the coastal plain in western Tunisia to gather 30,000 troops in 2 groups, all the way from the city of Ambala on the Algerian border to attack Tunisia. The other route crosses the Tabisa Mountains from Tersa in the center, seizes the central city Sousse and cuts off Tunisia. In addition, the Navy also expressed its willingness to provide 8,000 Marines to land in Binzat to prevent the enemy from escaping. Although Rouffari didn't know much about military affairs, he still understood through General Laurent's explanation that the military's combat plan met his expectations. Surround the enemy on all sides and give them no chance to escape. Only in this way can the Tunisian problem be solved quickly without giving the Italians a chance to intervene. It's good that the people are implementing this plan. By the way, who is leading the charge this time? After Rouffari praised the military's good plan, he asked who the general was leading the army. It's General Palissier. It turned out to be him. Rouffari also knew the commander given by the military. Of course, this General Palissier is not simple at all. He experienced the Franco-Prussian War before and was later transferred to North Africa. He has excellent ability in public security operations and has suppressed many riots and rebellions among Algerian indigenous people. A general who has experienced hundreds of battles. Algeria's population decreased by 500,000 to 1 million during this period, but the total population of Algeria was only 3 million. Of course, this alone is not enough to make Rouffari remember that General Palissier has also caused a lot of trouble in Paris. He was back in Paris on vacation and got into a fight with a journalist who was dissatisfied with what he had done in Algeria. After this incident was reported in the newspapers, his reputation in France was not good, but this was also appreciated by Jaffelli. In his view, General Palissier was a general who sought to gain benefits for France and could not be harmed intentionally. Since the military has given this candidate, it means that it hopes to use his ability to solve Tunisia as soon as possible. Rouffari is quite satisfied with this candidate, and the next step is to wait for the news of the meeting with Germany. The news from Germany did not keep them waiting, and a telegram was sent from Berlin a few days later. Special Envoy Romank has already met with Prime Minister Spiesmer. The German Prime Minister expressed support for France's actions in Tunisia. He told Special Envoy Romank, France should occupy Tunisia without thinking about Italy. Although Bismarck expressed support, Jaffelli, as the French Prime Minister, knew that this was just a strategy of the German Prime Minister to promote the continental policy. But this would be good for France, wouldn't it? Moreover, under its leadership, Germany was not interested in developing colonies at all, which was convenient for France. As for who has the right path in the future, let time prove everything. After receiving support from Britain and France, Jaffelli asked the French troops stationed in Algeria to begin secret preparations. Of course, everything requires an excuse. France is a civilized people, so how can it invade other countries at will? It happened that a love killing involving tribes on both sides was exploited by France. Chapter 27 Invasion of Tunisia. a young man from the Harami tribe in northwest Tunisia fell in love with a girl from a tribe in French Algeria. At that time, border management between the two countries was lax, and intermarriage between border tribes often occurred. Once, a young man went to visit the woman's relatives in French Algeria. Unexpectedly, he was killed by the woman's cousin who was dissatisfied with their relationship. His body was thrown into the street. This triggered a conflict between the two tribes. The Harami tribe of Tunisia crossed the border to attack tribes in French Algeria, and the tribes of French Algeria also crossed the border and fought back. Faced with such a God-given opportunity, how could the French, who had no excuse, miss it? First, they encouraged the Harami tribe in Tunisia to take revenge and provided guns and ammunition. Later, he turned to support the resistance of the French Algerian tribes, causing this transnational love murder case to gradually evolve from a tribal conflict into a local war. After the situation escalated, France plausibly accused Tunisia of invading French Algerian territory and harming the interests of France and Algeria. And before Tunisia could scratch its head and give a reply, the well-prepared French army immediately sent troops. The French army from Algeria appeared on Tunisian soil. Their first prize was the border city of Telf. This small border town with a population of more than 10,000 people naturally fell after being attacked by more than 20,000 French troops. Hundreds of Tunisian troops in the city fled and scattered, leaving only a mess. The residents in the city were hiding in their rooms, watching the French troops through the cracks in the door with a disturbed expression. Their only hope now was that the French would not cause too much trouble to the city. There is no cover up at all about what the French army is doing in Algeria. For these hungry French people, many families are dressing up their children in various ways to make them look ugly. But their worries were in vain. The French commander who led the team had no intention of staying to relax. Instead, after leaving a battalion to maintain public security and wait for the follow-up troops, he continued to march non-stop, even if he took a break to catch his breath. No point, because the commander of this combat mission, General Palace, had already stated that this combat mission would be fast. Every day needs to be planned. How many kilometers to march and where to hit are all clearly specified in the combat plan. Of course, the French commander who served as the vanguard did not dare to neglect the task in any way, and he kept urging the troops to move forward. Of course, this was not the only French army that the residents of Telf saw today. A few hours later, most of the mighty French army appeared in front of them. Mighty cavalry, rifle-carrying riflemen lined up neatly, and countless cannons in the back half of the team were being driven forward by several horses. Beyond the cannons, the logistics carriages covered with canvas were equally huge, incomparable. The dust it raises blocks the sky and makes even well-informed local residents feel uneasy. General Palace, who was in charge of commanding this military operation in the team, was very satisfied. In his opinion, this military operation was completely like a march. The Kingdom of Tunisia has a few pounds, but he doesn't take it seriously. After living in Algeria for many years, although the Tunisian ruler Mohammed Sadiq III began to imitate the westernization practices of the Egyptian Khedive, Ottoman Turkish, meaning governor, Muhammad Ali, and implemented a series of reforms 20 years ago. Focus on developing the economy, improving education levels, improving infrastructure and communication facilities, purchasing new weapons for the army and navy, and adopting Western-style training methods. However, Tunisia's economic situation and political system have hindered the implementation of reforms. The weak economy is unable to provide the funds needed to implement reforms. The old tax system allows only 1/5 of the taxes collected to enter the national treasury, and the rest is subsidized by local governments. Officials are lining their pockets, and the Tunisian central government lacks authority and execution to ensure that reforms are implemented at the lowest level. The only result was that his guard was well equipped and well trained, but it was a pity that it was too small. With only 3,000 men, there was no way it could be a match for the elite French army. To put it bluntly, in the wild, General Palace only needed 1,500 men to defeat the opponent. Not to mention that he now has more than 30,000 troops in his hands. Of course, He knows that his troops may not only compete with the Tunisians, but also their good neighbors, the Italians. He was also undaunted by the possible threat from the Italians. The combat effectiveness of these Italians, who relied on French help to unify, was worrisome. Previous battles with the Austrians have proven that putting your hopes on them will make you vomit blood. Point of course, there are Italians who are not so incompetent, and that is Garibaldi's red shirts. But how old is this old guy? I wonder if he can still recognize the symbols on the battle map. General Palicia was full of confidence in this military operation. When General Palicia led the French army towards the city of Tunis, a large number of warships and a number of transport ships were also sailing on the outer sea. The crowd stood tall on the transport ship, all dressed in French military attire. Yes, these were the French Marines. In order to cooperate with the army's actions, the Navy also sent out 8,000 Marines this time, and their targeted spins at outside Tunisia. Faced with the French invasion, the Tunisian government did not know about it at first. They only got the news the next day. This news was brought by a British merchant ship. This news made the Tunisian government panic, and the ministers were even more confused. All ideas. Some people suggested that the French should apologize to the French and ask them to stop military operations in Tunisia. Others suggested that Britain and Italy be invited to mediate their conflicts with France. In addition, some people think that just retreating like this is not enough. It is best to let France see Tunisia's determination to defend its homeland and summon troops and tribes from all over the country to resist the French invasion. The various suggestions from these people gave Muhammad Sadiq III, who was in power, a headache. However, now that the French invasion is just around the corner, he must make a decision as soon as possible. Whether it is war, peace, or whatever, it needs to be done as soon as possible. Think of ways to point. Although Sadiq III was not a wise man, he had held power for more than 20 years, and he immediately thought of an idea. First, we need to contact the French to see what is going on. In addition, we need to contact the British and Italians, ask them to mediate, and summon the army to send troops to the tribes and let them come to Tunisia. We need to strengthen ourselves. Strength makes the French take advantage of it. It has to be said that Sadiq has not been messing around in vain for more than 20 years, and he immediately came up with several ways to prepare. However, he underestimated the determination of the French this time. Just as the ministers were walking out with their orders, an attendant suddenly rushed in. The French fleet has appeared at Binzat. The enemy is currently shelling the defenders and is almost unable to withstand them. This news immediately exploded, and many people did not expect that the French would arrive so quickly. The news was actually too late. The garrison stationed in Binzat dispersed after the enemy fleet appeared. At least they still knew to notify the Tunisian government. Binzat was now full of landed French troops. Apart from the damage caused by the bombardment, contact the UK and Italy immediately and ask them to mediate. Sadiq III, who received the news at this time, felt that the situation was not good and requested mediation. First, with Sadiq III's order, Italy finally learned the news of the accident in Tunisia. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28: The Prime Minister's Response. When news of the French invasion of Tunisia reached Rome, it immediately caused an uproar. There is no need to mention the importance of Tunisia to Italy. Its investment in Tunisia alone in recent years has reached 578 million lire. This amount of money cannot be lost. As Prime Minister, Carlo naturally knew this, so as soon as he got the news, he immediately convened a meeting of cabinet ministers to discuss this matter urgently, which was related to Italy's vital interests. After all the ministers arrived, Carlo first introduced the purpose of convening this meeting. Everyone, the situation is urgent, and I will keep my story short. The French army is now invading Tunisia, and His Highness Bey has extended an invitation to us to mediate his fight with France. Carol's words made many people scratch their heads. They were not fine yesterday, so why did this happen suddenly without any sound? Seeing that many people don't know the whole story, His Excellency the Prime Minister, who just found out the cause, once again told the reason point after hearing that this happened because of the war between two tribes in Tunisia and Algeria due to love killings. Many people smelled something strange. He directly expressed his response without waiting for other remarks. Your Excellency Sforza, now we need to know the attitude of Britain and Germany, and we hope that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs can obtain its support as soon as possible. In addition, we must summon the French ambassador as soon as possible to express our dissatisfaction. Prime Minister Caroli is still very accurate in seeing the problem. He knows that the only countries that have the ability to stop France are Britain and Germany, so he now needs the support of Britain and Germany. I believe Britain and Germany will not let France capture Tunisia. It must be said that France did an excellent job of keeping this operation confidential. Until now, Italy still does not know that France has obtained the support of Britain and Germany. Of course, he did not place all his hopes on the support of the two countries. After giving instructions to the Foreign Secretary, he immediately gave instructions to the military representative, the Minister of War, General Saragut. Your Majesty General, now I need to express Italy's attitude, so your military must also respond. Prime Minister, please give the order. Admiral Saragut, who had commanded several battles in the Unification War and fought in every battle, was certainly not an idiot. France's invasion of Tunisia is too harmful to Italy. As Italy's sword, the military will certainly not back down if there is any hesitation at this time. Otherwise, if there is any problem in the future, then the board is likely to hit the military. Okay, I'll say it directly. I hope your military can gather troops towards the French border to exert pressure and influence. In addition, the Navy will mobilize warships and transport ships to make a gesture of supporting Tunisia. Of course, before there is an order, the military must not take the initiative to attack. Even if it is attacked, it must report to Rome as soon as possible. Although Caroli's words sounded very discouraging, they received the inner support of everyone present. The people present are all high-level Italians. They are not young, and they know the huge gap between Italy and France. Although Italy is known as the new great power, they know exactly what they are. To put it bluntly, with Italy's current strength, as long as a full-scale war breaks out with France, it will only be beaten. Regardless of population, industry, or national influence, Italy is no match for France, even if it is compared to agricultural Italy. The gap is not small. Therefore, as Prime Minister, Caroli has a very clear idea, which is to flex his muscles and let France know that it is not easy to mess with, and then rely on the support of other countries to make France give up its invasion of Tunisia. Of course, in order for France to retreat before the difficulties, these alone are not enough. I saw him continue. Your Excellency Medici, I hope you can mobilize newspapers and other public opinion to report France's invasion of Tunisia, hoping to arouse the resonance of the people. This time he named Interior Minister Medici. Since France is strong, it must work hard to show off its biggest muscles, otherwise he, the Prime Minister, will step down by then. Although there is a risk that it will be difficult to step down if public opinion is mobilized, it is impossible to hide this matter from the people. Instead of the government being criticized when the time comes, it is better to spread the news first. Of course, if he doesn't handle it well, then he will definitely suffer a lot of infamy. But that was that sentence. No matter what, he was forced into a corner by France's move. We cannot let France withdraw from Tunisia, and we have to step down. We can no longer care about the infamy. In fact, Caroli didn't say a word. If France really occupied Tunisia, the loss of 578 million lire would be enough to make the creditors who invested in it tear themselves apart. Being able to retreat safely by then is considered the best outcome. Of course, if he wants to do something that no one wants to see, it is also impossible. Don't forget, he is just the Prime Minister, not the King. It is much easier to change the Prime Minister than the King. Of course, he still feels that these alone are not enough, and relying solely on the help of the people, the army, and other countries is still not enough. Thinking that this was a person who suddenly came to his mind, it seemed that he must be invited to come out to let France see Italy's determination. Without further ado, he continued to name names. Besides, this is not enough. We need a hero to stand up and lead the fight against the French invasion of Tunisia. Everyone present is not an idiot. Since he is a hero, he must be convincing. No one present now has this ability, or in other words, none of them can convince the people across the country. Point of course, there are smart people who have already thought of candidates, and Finance Minister Jaggali said at this time, "Prime Minister, are you talking about the one on Caprera Island?" "That's right." Facing the words of the Finance Minister, Caroli did not deny it at all. I saw him continue. "I plan to invite Garibaldi to come out, let him lead the people and let the French know our unwillingness to surrender." As soon as Garibaldi was asked to come out, the scene immediately fell silent. No one present wanted to go to Caprera Island, even though they praised Garibaldi so highly, considering his attitude towards the Republic. No one was willing to go. Seeing everyone who was speechless, Caroli felt a flash of displeasure in his heart. Since no one wanted to see Garibaldi, he could only name them. "Your Excellency Gillets, this time it is up to you to invite Garibaldi on behalf of the government, as you command." Prime Minister, the Minister of Commerce and Trade who was assigned this task, could only admit it, but in his heart he thought it was revenge on himself. "Absolutely, this is revenge for my previous excuse for not being able to integrate into their circle." Later, the Prime Minister discussed some other details and then adjourned the meeting. Regarding the news of France's invasion of Tunisia, the government was not the only one who received the news. As the King of Italy, Carlo also received the news. How so? Carlo was equally surprised by the news, and he couldn't help but complain to the captain of the guard who sent the news. In fact, he knew that Tunisia would be occupied by France, but he had no way to do it before he took power. Italy itself does not have the strength to compete with France, and since he has not done much research on this period of history, he naturally does not know when Tunisia was occupied by France. But to say that this incident had no impact on him would be just joking. However, he still needs to think hard about how to maximize his own interests. Chapter 29 Treaty of Bardo. Among Carola's methods, the first one that worked was to mobilize the people. In the evening and the next day, major newspapers published reports on the French army's invasion of Tunisia on their front pages. At this moment, the newspaper seemed to be the messenger of justice, showing infinite sympathy to the French bully for bullying the weak Tunisia. Tournon seems to have forgotten the fact that 10 years ago Italy planned to attack Tunisia, but was stopped by Britain and France. However, this news shocked the whole of Italy. Many people bought various colonial Tunisian bonds. Now their interests are harmed. No one can accept this possibility. Therefore, except for a small number of people who really care about weak Tunisia, people from all walks of life entered the square to oppose the French invasion of Tunisia. In Milan, more than 50,000 people gathered in the town hall square, shouting slogans against France's invasion of Tunisia and demanding France's withdrawal from Tunisia. As for Rome, 80,000 people surrounded the French embassy in Italy. They asked the French ambassador to come forward and give an explanation. If it weren't for the protection of the police, everyone in the embassy would have been torn apart by the excited people. In addition to the spontaneous public actions against France's invasion of Tunisia, the government also took actions. First, the French ambassador summoned by the Prime Minister expressed Italy's strong dissatisfaction with France's invasion of Tunisia. Later, after expressing the dissatisfaction of the Kingdom of Italy, His Excellency the Prime Minister proposed that Italy could provide mediation for the French and Tunisian parties to avoid the humanitarian disaster caused by the conflict between the two parties. Faced with the Prime Minister's statement, the French ambassador stated that he had not been notified of this and therefore could not give an immediate reply. In addition, in Paris, the news received by the ambassador in France was also pretty good. French Foreign Minister Gambetta informed the ambassador in France that France had no ambition to occupy any part of Tunisia, but that it had to use force in the Crimea area to prevent Algeria from being attacked by Tunisian bandits. Historical original words. Such news has made many people in Italy feel relieved. In order to avoid irritating France, various muscle flexing actions have been carried out intentionally or unintentionally, and even the momentum of the protests has been reduced a lot. After all, they wanted to stalemate relations with France, but they didn't know that France did not stop its military operations, but accelerated its pace. Point in the city of Tunis, the French army that had just arrived at the city, urged by the Commander General Palicia, immediately joined forces with the Marine Corps to launch an offensive against the city of Tunis. Although the defenders resisted desperately, they faced the French attack regardless of casualties. The French army broke through the defense line without even being blocked for a day. Point in the Tunisian palace, the ministers were panicked when they heard the sound of gunfire in the distance, but even so, many people were still trying to dissuade the ruler Sadiq III from leaving this place of right and wrong. Your Highness, the French army has entered the city now. If they don't leave, they won't be able to leave. Your Highness, we can't wait any longer. Faced with the pleadings of his ministers, Sadiq III still did not want to leave. This is the Tunisian city where he was born and raised, and he doesn't want to leave here at all. If we leave here, where can we go? We can go to Istanbul and ask the Sultan for help. You can go to London and find British people. Go to Rome and ask for help from the Italians. Go to Cairo and find His Highness Ali. The minister's various suggestions gave Sadiq a headache. However, he himself knew very well that no matter where he went, he was just a down and out monarch who had lost his country. Although he did not know that there was an old saying in China that a down and out phoenix was not as good as a chicken, but the meaning was very clear. This is also the reason why he has been reluctant to leave, because many monarchs who have been exiled in history have died in depression, and he does not want that kind of experience at all. Perhaps the French also need him to maintain local continuity. Anyway, historically Tunisia was also a vassal of the Ottomans. If the owner changes, the family's status can be preserved. Of course, this is the worst plan. Maybe it's just like the French said. They just want to punish the Harabi tribe for their transgression. When the time comes, there will be no problem in paying compensation, as long as the family can continue to be bey, governor. Is fine. The minister had no idea that Sadiq III's mentality had completely changed by this time. He had changed from preserving Tunisia's independent status to preserving its power. Okay, I already have an idea. Just stay in Tunisia and negotiate with the French. Sadiq III's words shocked everyone else, but they had nothing to do about it. Since Bey had already decided, they could only do what he wanted. So the French army suddenly discovered that the Tunisian army was no longer resisting. Instead, a man who looked like a religious figure holding a white flag came to them. Hello, I'm the Tunisian Malak Khalifa. On behalf of the Tunisian Bey, I'm willing to discuss peace matters with the commander of your army. Facing the Tunisian peace negotiator, the French army did not dare to make the decision privately and immediately sent him to the commander, General Palicia. Your Excellency Khalifa, I can accept your request. However, in order to avoid misunderstandings between the two of us, it is best for your army to return to the military camp to avoid misunderstandings. Who is Palicia? He is an experienced person. This is just a surrender in the name of peace talks. Of course, he gives face and name, but in fact he still chooses to surrender. Of course, Khalifa knew his purpose this time. When he saw the French commander agreeing, he knew that his mission was completed. Well, Your Majesty General, I hope you can order the attack to be suspended, so that those innocent people can survive. No problem, but we can give you 2 hours at most. If they don't return to the military camp by then, they are not innocent people. Since the Tunisians intend to surrender, Palicia does not mind showing his generosity. Of course, he must also warn the other party of the consequences of violation. In fact, his warning was completely useless. When the armistice took effect, the Tunisian soldiers, led by their respective commanders, returned to the military camp one after another, which made the French army cheer. After all, no one wants to be harmed when the overall situation has been decided. Subsequently, the French army occupied various key points in the city. Only then did Palicia bring a group of soldiers to see Sadiq. Hello, His Highness Sadiq. Hello, General Palicia. After a brief greeting, Palicia took a document from the adjutant behind him and spoke. Your Highness, in order to avoid tragedies like this one from happening in the future, our country has drawn up a contract, and I hope that Your Highness can sign it for the sake of peace between the people of the two countries. Facing Pelicia's words, Sadiq III was mentally prepared. He wanted to make the French stop the war without giving anything. How could this be possible? He immediately took the document and opened it. The document contained France's requirements. However, the terms included made His Highness Bey feel dizzy, even though he was mentally prepared. There are no too complicated conditions above, but in order to avoid the current situation between the two countries, France wants to station troops in Tunisia. In addition, given Tunisia's dire financial situation, France helps Tunisia manage its finances. In addition, in order to prevent Tunisia from getting into complicated diplomatic issues, France reluctantly helped Tunisia handle its foreign affairs. Of course, it respects the terms that Tunisia has signed with various countries before, but France will take care of it in the future. It can be said that this condition will hand over Tunisia's military, financial and diplomacy to France, and Sadiq III will become France's puppet in Tunisia. Faced with such a result, Sadiq's face turned red. Your Majesty General, is this condition too much for our country? Facing Sadiq's desire to bargain, Perissia refused directly. Your Highness, this is not much at all. It is all for the sake of Tunisia's security and interests, but no. But, I already said this is for the sake of Tunisia. Seeing that Sadiq was not interested, Perissia scolded him directly. Only by letting this person know that France's will cannot be changed, can we give him enough care. Faced with such scolding, Sadiq, who was Bey, turned even redder. Your Highness doesn't want to regret it. Perissia looked at the other party with interest, and as his words fell, the French soldiers he brought looked at the Tunisians in front of them with expressions of confusion. No problem, I'll sign. Seeing that the situation was heading towards the worst outcome, Sadiq III quickly agreed. This is how we can ensure peace in Tunisia. After the Bey finished signing, Perissia took the still undried treaty and casually tried to persuade the lost Sadiq II. Then he led the French soldiers away, leaving only a group of Tunisians with bitter faces. Chapter 30 Lies. After the French government forced Sadiq III to sign a treaty, its attitude towards Italy immediately changed drastically. Its foreign minister Gambetta publicly stated that Tunisia has voluntarily become a protected country of France, and that France's interests cannot be violated. France's rapid change of attitude frightened everyone in Italy. Of course, Tunisia was forced to sign the Bardo Treaty with France, and Italy was naturally informed of it. Faced with the French doing one thing in front of others, and another behind their backs, the kind-hearted Italian people were completely angry. They broke out into a larger scale demonstration game, and more than 100,000 people surrounded the French embassy in the capital Rome. Had it not been for the police's efforts to keep the demonstrators at bay, considering the diplomatic implications, no one would have made it out alive from the French embassy. Of course, it's not like they haven't done anything. At least the French embassy's outer wall should be renovated. Of course, people's anger alone cannot accomplish anything, and the Italian government also knows this, so the previously slowed response plan immediately accelerated, and as if to give itself a voice, its speed was much faster than before. Among them, the Italian military was the fastest. The Italian troops of the two armies in the north quickly moved from Venice, stationed on the border with Austria, to Turin, the important town against France, through the basically completed northern railway. The two armies moved 500 kilometers in 4 days, which was also a new high in the history of Italian army marches. And such a result is enough to make the army proud. Although these are all reasons for using the railway, the army's efforts are also inseparable. Apart from anything else, just look at how many trains were mobilized from Venice to Turin, and how many trains were delayed, because they needed to avoid military transportation lines. Although it is normal for Italian trains to be delayed, there is still a huge difference between being 1 or 2 hours late and half a day late. At the same time, Garibaldi, a national hero, also stood up. He rushed to Palermo to attend a rally on May 8th. As a friend of France, I will try my best to maintain our friendship with it. But I'm first of all an Italian, and I will devote my life so that Italy will not be insulted by anyone. If France is allowed to occupy Tunisia, Italy will not only be humiliated, but its interests and security will also be threatened. It is a great shame for a great republic to send troops to occupy a brother country. The Italian fleet should immediately go to the Gulf of Tunis to protect the 5,000 Italian soldiers there. The two major islands in our southern coastal area should immediately carry out combat readiness mobilization to prevent unexpected events. The 5,000 soldiers Garibaldi mentioned were the troops that were rushed over from Sicily after learning that France had invaded Tunisia. They used the pretext of protecting expatriates to prevent France from taking drastic actions. It is currently stationed in Eris, southeast of Tunisia, where they, together with emergency armed Italian expatriates, defend Italian interests in Tunisia. Faced with Italy's series of actions, France gave a warning. As French Prime Minister, Jaffelli spoke publicly to warn Italy about its behavior. Tunisia is not an Italian colony, and France's actions in Tunisia do not require Italian approval. So Italians had better recognize the facts and not make moves that would embarrass others and themselves. In addition, the French military also warned Italy about adding 2 more troops to the border. General Laurent, who is the Minister of War, spoke publicly. Italy had better think carefully before making a decision. If Italy makes a substantial move, the French army will not mind a military parade in Rome. Although both parties are saying harsh words, they are actually cautious. The French army in Tunisia maintained restraint. Although they were sending troops to various cities in Tunisia to declare their sovereignty, they did not send a single soldier to Eris, where the Italian army was stationed, as if this city was not important. Moreover, Italian industries in Tunisia have not suffered losses, and France has acquiesced that Italy's previous assets are not infringed. Of course, France had no intention of taking action against Italy, and Italy did not dare to provoke the other party. The 2 armies that arrived in Turin were not sent to the border. They still stopped in Turin. To be fair, neither side wants to trigger a war, so they can only sit down and negotiate to find a solution. In fact, although Italy was at a disadvantage at this time, it could not just give up on Tunisia. However, at this time, Italy was dealt a heavy blow diplomatically. Both Britain and Germany refused to support Italy. Instead, they persuaded Italy to recognize the facts, and that it was best not to get too entangled in Tunisia. Britain and Germany's statements made Italy desperate, because Britain and Germany are currently the only people Italy can seek support from. It should be noted here that Italy's current foreign policy is isolationism. This not only reduces Italy's involvement in European disputes, but it also leaves Italy with few substantial allies. As for Britain and Germany, they are the only support Italy can seek when its relations with neighboring France and Austria are not very harmonious. Austria has always had poor relations due to territorial disputes, while France has been involved in the Italian unification war, which has harmed France's interests. German capital has a high proportion of investment in Italy, and Italy's shipbuilding strength is supported by the United Kingdom. Its goal is to currently occupy the 2nd place in the world. French Navy, facing the fact that Britain and Germany did not support itself on the Tunisia issue, Italy was extremely disappointed. If Italy is disappointed, then for Prime Minister Caroli, it is death, political death. Caroli is very aware of the consequences of losing Tunisia. If there is no other way, then someone needs to calm the people's anger, and there is no more suitable candidate than the Prime Minister, so he is the most anxious at this time. Of course, just being anxious can't change the outcome. He needs to find another way, but first he needs to boost the morale of his own people. After Britain and Germany did not support Italy on the Tunisia issue, there was a cry within the government. Such an atmosphere cannot solve any problems, so Caroli held another cabinet meeting to boost morale. Caroli coughed and asked everyone to pay attention to him before he spoke. I know that everyone is a little desperate about the current situation, but please believe that we must have a way to solve this problem, at least to give us a foothold in Tunisia. Caroli's words did not inspire everyone's morale, because no one is stupid. Anyone can see the current situation. Italy is already isolated and helpless when it comes to the Tunisian issue. Caroli also knew this. If he didn't give them a little hope, it would really be irreversible, so he continued. Please believe that I have a plan. Although it may not necessarily allow France to withdraw from Tunisia, it can at least ensure that our interests are not harmed. However, this plan needs to be kept secret, so I cannot say it now. Carol's words finally gave the venue a boost, and many people saw a glimmer of hope. Is this true? Yes, please believe me, but to avoid being leaked, please forgive me for not being able to say it. After receiving the Prime Minister's personal answer, more people were moved, and most people in the venue were willing to believe him. As for why the Prime Minister can't say that, no one will ask this idiot question. Okay, that's all I can say for now. I hope everyone can do their part well in the future. I alone can't make the French agree to our request. After boosting everyone's morale, Caroli left the venue. Only then did he feel his back was soaked. Yes, he was lying. He didn't have a plan right now, but if morale stayed like this there was no chance. Maybe he should pray to God for a miracle. Chapter 31 Secret Meeting. You mean, the Prime Minister has another plan? Yes, this was said by the Prime Minister himself, and many people were present at the time. In the palace, Carlo was listening to the Chief of Guards telling what had just happened in the Prime Minister's palace. He certainly opposed France's invasion of Tunisia. The consequences for Italy were very serious. It can be said that France's behavior this time directly caused Italy to turn to Germany and Austria. Of course, this is a public aspect, but privately, this matter is very beneficial to him. Not to mention anything else, because of the Tunisia issue, many caring people are currently expressing goodwill to him. Of course, surrender is not counted, but it is just to leave a way out for himself. What is even more gratifying is that the largest opposition at present, former Prime Minister Despretis, has expressed his goodwill. He proposed in Parliament that the Electrical Research Centre in Merano is of great significance to Italy, so he hopes that the government will allocate funds to support the scientific research of the research centre. Although the proposal was not adopted, Carlo had already received the message. Of course, this does not mean that Despretis wants to move closer to Carlo, but his move also shows that at least Carlo has become a presence that cannot be ignored in Italian political circles. Of course, Duca Media, the regent, also made great efforts. Because of his excellent performance, many people found that if they want to make good friends with the royal family, the young monarch is more reliable. At least he does not have to worry about dying on a certain woman's belly. Moreover, after nearly a year of their observation, His Majesty Carlo learned politics very quickly, and his reputation was also very good. With some bonus points, he naturally attracted a group of young officials. These people were mainly focused on the future, rather than the present. Whatever their intentions, it was a good thing for Carlo. Since you become a member of a political force, you must abide by the rules of the game. Therefore, those Eastern dramas of killing powerful ministers and returning power cannot be played in Europe. But God was helping him, and the Prime Minister encountered the French invasion of Tunisia. Of course, Carlo is not willing to let Italy suffer losses. Among other things, Tunisia is too important to Italy. But after carefully referring to the gap between the two countries, Carlo had to think that he had no good solution to this. They are defeated again and again, and there is no one to help them. What can they fight for? France will not spit out the meat in its mouth just by relying on slogans, so he was a little surprised when he heard that the Prime Minister still had something to do. What else could the Prime Minister do to reverse all this? Of course, Carlo is not an arrogant person. Just because he can't think of a way doesn't mean that others can't think of it. It's just that some things must be taken precautions, so he still needs to make some preparations. Carlo thought for a while, and said again, after listening to the captain of the guard story, you arrange for someone you trust enough to contact Mr. Despretis, and tell him that you want to talk to him. Yes, Carlo had contact with Despretis. When the experimental center opened, he felt the kindness of the former Prime Minister. Although he did not make any expression, this did not mean that he was unwilling to contact the other party. Treat with caution. Carlo knew that he had a natural advantage as the monarch of Italy. Although he did not hold power for a while, he had a bright future, so every move he made required special attention. But now, he thinks some preparations need to be made. Of course, Carlo didn't want to hold back. It was impossible for him to do anything detrimental to Italy. It's just to prepare some aftermath. When the situation is irreversible, point of course, the specific situation needs to wait until he talks to the former prime minister before he can make a decision. As you command, Your Majesty. During this period, the former prime minister had a prosperous life, especially after France invaded Tunisia, and the number of people visiting Tunisia increased day by day. Therefore, even his old butler has improved, making him feel as if he has returned to the moment when his master was the prime minister, and he is a few years younger. But today, the old butler's steps were a little hurried. After nodding to the guests who were talking, he walked up to Desperatiss and whispered a few words in his ear. Then Desperatiss stood up and spoke apologetically. Everyone, I'm sorry, I have something to delay. Let's stop here today, where this is the time we are spending to delay, Your Excellency. Facing this big man's apology, no one could really understand. Everyone immediately said goodbye to the master and left one by one. After all these people left, Desperatiss came to the study under the leadership of the old housekeeper. You stay outside and guard. Desperatiss, who walked to the door, immediately gave an order. Okay, sir. After the old housekeeper answered, he stood quietly at the door. As soon as Desperatiss opened the door, he immediately put on a smile. Baron Felicius, long time no see. Yes, the person in his study is His Excellency the Chief of Guards. When confidentiality is required, what better result could there be than having him come in person? Mr. Desperatiss, long time no see. Faced with the greeting of the former prime minister, the captain of the guard also responded. I am very honored to have Your Excellency the Chief of Guards come to visit you this time. Faced with the former prime minister's inquiry, Felici immediately stated the purpose of his visit. Mr. Desperatiss has made great contributions to Italy during his tenure as prime minister. His Majesty admires him very much and has always wanted to have a good conversation with you. The Baron's words made Desperatiss laugh. Ha 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 ha, I didn't expect that I would be so favored by His Majesty. Since Your Majesty wants to summon you, I naturally want to be summoned. The young monarch wants to see him, which is very good news for Desperatiss, and he certainly will not ignore the role of the royal family. He has been trying to get in touch with the royal family since he wanted to regain his position as prime minister, as evidenced by this series of overtures. But this time the captain of the guard came to invite him personally. There must be a reason. Sure enough, after hearing that he was willing to meet the king, Baron Felicius continued. Since you are willing, let's discuss the place to meet. No problem. Is the meeting place also subject to negotiation? Yes, that's right. It just needs to be discussed, because the meeting place this time is not in the palace. There are many people talking in the palace, so it is not a suitable place. Especially at this sensitive time, it is even more inappropriate. It was obvious that Desperatiss, the former prime minister, also knew this, so he agreed very much with the captain of the guard for the meeting place. The two talked about the time and the entourage for another half an hour, and then the captain of the guard quietly left under the leadership of the old housekeeper. A few days later, Carlo made another trip to the Electrical Research Center in Mirano. However, compared with the previous times, he set off half an hour earlier, but his arrival time was delayed by half an hour. The reason given was that the carriage was broken and needed to be repaired, but no one paid attention to this detail. Chapter 32 Ultimatum. This secret meeting between Carlo and Desperatiss was hidden from everyone, because there were very few people in contact this time. Apart from the two parties, there were only the old butler and the captain of the guard, so no one else in Italy knew that the two had already met quietly. As for the content of the conversation between the two, nothing has been revealed. Only the two of them know it. After this meeting, the two became even more secretive, and it was impossible to mention it to others. However, their meeting is not the most urgent matter in Italy at the moment. Instead, the Tunisia problem and the drought in the south are the most urgent problems that Italy needs to solve. Yes, the drought in the south has been mentioned on a par with the crisis in Tunisia. It seems that this is all to blame the French. Their invasion of Tunisia forced Italy to focus its main energy on dealing with Tunisia. Italy's finances are not rich to begin with, but in order to deal with the crisis in Tunisia, it naturally needs to spend money. Actions such as military gathering and deployment, declaration of public opinion and so on, do not require spending money. This naturally drained all the money the government had in its pockets. The drought, which lacks government assistance, is naturally getting worse. Several riots have broken out, and the hungry people have robbed several nobles. These robbed nobles rushed to the city to cry to the government, which made local officials very anxious. Fortunately, the people affected by the disaster were still somewhat sensible and did not take any action to attack the government. Of course, the local government cannot hide such a major event and can only report the problem, so this adds a lot of trouble to the justice of the court. Of course, we cannot sit idly by and ignore this matter. We must find a way to solve it. The impact of the drought is too serious. In Sicily and southern Italy, the number of people affected has expanded to more than 5 million people. We cannot delay it any longer. The person who was speaking in the venue was Interior Minister Sforza. I saw this important cabinet minister expressing his opinions impassionately. As Sforza spoke, the atmosphere in the venue became increasingly strange, with many people discussing in low voices, which made Prime Minister Carlo, who presided over the meeting, secretly feel sad, because he knows what the atmosphere in the venue means. To use an old Chinese saying, it means that people are scattered, and it is difficult to lead the team. For many days in a row, he didn't come up with a solution, which made many people confused. If there weren't too many problems to deal with now, maybe we would start questioning him publicly. Of course, there are no public ones, but there must be some who express their doubts privately. The reason is very simple. Everyone is at the same level. Although the Prime Minister is better informed, the ministers are not much different. As long as you inquire a little bit, no matter what secret operation it is, some clues will be revealed, which is very strange. Let's say it's a matter of diplomacy. Foreign Minister Sforza shook his head and said that there was nothing unusual about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Let's say it's a military matter. The military representative, General Sergeant, waved his hand and said that the military didn't find anything. Therefore, a group of people have not discovered the Prime Minister's secret actions from various signs, which has to make people suspicious. Although he personally assured that the plan is very confidential, it is impossible that there is no movement at all. Although I don't know what the plan is, it is nothing more than diplomatic and military. This makes people feel very strange. They say they have a plan, but there is no movement at all. Many people are speculating whether the Prime Minister is greedy for power, so he finds an excuse to drag everyone down. Of course, no one can say these speculations out loud. If they are wrong, they will not be accused of committing adultery. Even the famous pro-French leader and former Prime Minister Mr. Despotis has been shouting these days that he wants to compete with the French in Tunisia. Of course, there are also people who believe deeply in His Excellency the Prime Minister, such as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, who stood up to contradict him. Your Majesty Sforza, we all understand the situation you mentioned, but now the government has no money. What do you want us to use for disaster relief? What? Jagali said. Change the atmosphere in the venue. Don't. You still have 80 million lire in government reserves. It was obvious that the Home Secretary came prepared this time and immediately pointed out that there was still a sum of money in the government. However, his words made those present who understood financial operations shake their heads. Ha ha ha. Sforza's words made Jagali laugh angrily. He looked at the Minister of the Interior with great contempt and said, "Do you know what the reserve fund is used for? Take out the reserve fund now. If another accident occurs, you will be responsible for it." Every government has a reserve fund, but these funds are the most difficult to use. This is set up by the government to prevent bankruptcy caused by uncontrollable financial reasons. It is obvious that the Home Secretary played the wrong card. The Home Secretary, who was deprived of his momentum, stopped talking. It was obvious that he was defeated this time. However, although the Home Secretary is not speaking, it does not mean that no one refutes the Finance Minister's words. Your Excellency Jagali, the Ministry of Finance currently has no money, so what will we do next to deal with the popular riots caused by the drought and the crisis in Tunisia? This time it was Minister of Commerce and Trade Gilites who spoke, and his words caused everyone present to whisper. Yes, since the Ministry of Finance has no money, Jagali, as the Minister of Finance, should come up with a solution. Faced with the accountability from the Minister of Commerce and Trade, Jagali naturally had his own way of dealing with it. I saw him speak. In this regard, we have approached Britain and Germany to discuss the loan, and the progress of the negotiations is pretty good. However, although Jagali gave a solution, some people were still dissatisfied, and Agriculture Minister Mark Leder spoke. As far as I know, the loan currently negotiated with Yingde is £5 million. Although this amount of money seems to be a lot, I'm afraid it is not enough to solve our current difficulties. As the Minister of Agriculture spoke, the atmosphere at the venue became increasingly weird, and many people felt that a storm was gathering in the venue. It is obvious that someone is dissatisfied with the Prime Minister, otherwise how could he understand so thoroughly? So many neutral people began to look at their noses and hearts, and made up their minds to say nothing at this meeting point. However, as Prime Minister Caroli, who presided over the meeting, he did not have any fear of the scene before him. As an old politician, he can still be afraid when someone wants to cause trouble. Without waiting for anyone else to speak, he slapped the table and stood up, looking at the other person with sharp eyes. Then what should we do according to Lord Macleod's wishes? Facing the imposing Prime Minister, Markley eyed, as the Minister of Agriculture, cursed in his heart. Why did it happen to me? I think snapped. There was another sound of slamming on the table, and the Prime Minister loudly rebuked the other party. What I think is, do you have any solution? Just say yes or no. Being continuously deprived of his momentum made Macleod feel like snow exposed to the sun. I wanted to speak, but after enduring it, there was no follow-up point. After defeating the Minister of Agriculture, Caroli looked at the other two challengers, only to find that they were overwhelmed by the Prime Minister's momentum. Snapped. There was another sound of slamming on the table. Since there is no other way, just listen to what others say, and don't think about making trouble. With his years of majesty as Prime Minister, Caroli, who was suppressed and submissive in the venue, sat down and prepared to continue the meeting point. After seeing with their own eyes that the three troublemakers were dealt with, other neutral people put away their thoughts and continued to prepare to listen to other people's speeches. However, this meeting was destined to be unsustainable. There was a bang, the door was opened, and a panting official ran in. He ignored the murderous looks of the big guys present and went directly to Foreign Minister Sforza. Your Excellency, this is an urgent diplomatic letter. Commissioner Makenessel wants me to come and deliver it to you immediately. Upon hearing what this official said, Sforza didn't care about anything else and immediately opened it and read it. However, the more he looked at it, the worse his face became. After reading the diplomatic letter, he handed it to the official with an ugly expression. After meeting the Prime Minister, he fell down and sat down facing the Foreign Minister, who fell down next to him. Prime Minister Caroli did not help him at all because he was looking at the diplomatic letter intently. However, the more he looked at it, the redder his face became, and his eyes seemed to be trying to read the diplomatic letter, see through the general. But suddenly, Caroli closed his eyes tightly, tilted his shoulders, and fell to the ground with a snap. Faced with this situation, the venue immediately became chaotic. And in the diplomatic letter that fell on the carpet, there were clearly several bold French words. Ultimatum. Chapter 33 Surrender. Prime Minister Caroli fainted in a conference room. In the past, such a big event would have made the front page of the newspaper. But today he failed to make the headlines because France issued an ultimatum to Italy. Such stormy news was the front page of the newspaper. This ultimatum requires Italy to withdraw its armed forces from Tunisia within 3 days. Otherwise France will take necessary measures. As for what the necessary measures are, I believe it goes without saying. After this news was revealed by the newspaper, people were immediately shocked. Large-scale anti-French demonstrations broke out in various cities, and people who felt offended used their actions to express their dissatisfaction with France. As a national hero, Garibaldi gave a public speech in Palermo as soon as he got the news, promoting the formation of a new red shirt army to fight for Italy. However, although there are many tough voices among the Italian people, some even think that going to war is not a big deal. But within the government, everyone is pessimistic about the ultimatum issued by France. It can be said that if you are not a householder, you don't know how expensive firewood and rice are. Unlike people who can vent their emotions at will, Officials have their own concerns. In fact, in the face of France's threat of war, the opinion within the Italian government is to accept France's request and withdraw its troops from Tunisia. Even the military has acquiesced in this attitude, otherwise it would not have said that the army would fight for Italy instead of fighting for Italy's interests after France issued a war threat. Now that the toughest military has backed down, peaceful people in the government are grabbing a lot of attention. Therefore, the issue of troop withdrawal has become a top priority, and if you want to withdraw troops, someone needs to give the order at this time. The first candidate that everyone thought of was Prime Minister Carlo, who had just returned from the hospital. Your Excellency, the Prime Minister is in a very bad state right now. After passing out at the venue, he seems to have aged 10 years. But with the issuance of the French ultimatum, everyone knows that the Prime Minister's political life has entered a countdown point. So for many people, jumping off the sinking ship of the Prime Minister has become the first factor. Since you want to jump ship, you need to choose a destination. The most popular one at the moment is former Prime Minister Desperatus. Of course, Speaker Leslie and the rebel trio also have a lot of people who have joined them. However, among them, those who surrendered to King Carlo were at the forefront. If Carlo hadn't been strict in his selection and only required capable people, he would have been ranked second. This is just an unexpected surprise. Carlo is currently most concerned about how the government handles the crisis in Tunisia. In fact, not only him, but now Italy and even the whole of Europe are paying attention to how Italy responds to the threat from France. However, among these countries, the most active one is the UK, which has been silent for a long time. After France issued the ultimatum, the British ambassador paid a visit to Foreign Minister Sforza and expressed that Britain firmly stood with Italy and opposed French diplomatic blackmail, and is willing to provide an emergency loan for Italy to strengthen its own armaments, although the interest on this loan is a bit high, and the warships and weapons provided are also of high quality and price. Sforza, as the foreign minister, still said that Italy would never forget to thank the British Empire for its help in this critical moment. British kindness except for the United Kingdom. Other countries basically showed indifference when Italy faced the French ultimatum. At most, they called on both parties to exercise restraint and not to bring war slogans to Europe. Among them, Germany, which Italy has high hopes for, privately told Italy that Germany could not help with the Tunisian issue. However, if France takes action against Italy, Germany will provide Italy with enough supplies, but of course Italy will have to spend money to buy all of this. The attitudes of European countries are enough to illustrate their disregard for Italy on the Tunisian issue. Of course, this is also the consequence of isolation diplomacy. Italy has no friends in Europe. Of course, now is not the time for reflection. The priority that needs to be resolved is France's ultimatum. Everyone has their own solution, but they all know that no matter who gives the order to evacuate from Tunisia, they are destined to be nailed to the pillar of shame. Therefore, it has become everyone's consensus that Prime Minister Carlo, who has reached the end of his political life, issued an order to withdraw troops in order for His Excellency the Prime Minister to issue orders. All cabinet members went to the Prime Minister's official residence collectively. Cough. Cough cough. Prime Minister Carlo coughed a few times with a sick look on his face, took a glass of water from Secretary Doss, and took a sip. This fainting made the Prime Minister feel as if most of his life had been sucked out. All the problems he had never felt before appeared on him. Symptoms such as coughing, unable to straighten his waist, and general weakness all made him feel really old. No longer has the all-powerful attitude before. However, even though Carlo has become old, the cabinet ministers surrounding him still do not relax at all, which shows his energy in the hearts of these people. These people gathered in a circle and watched every move of the Prime Minister. Everyone had different thoughts, but they all had a tacit understanding and did not express it. So this made the atmosphere very weird. You didn't speak, and I didn't speak. We were all watching the Prime Minister silently. Of course, this weird situation didn't last long, and finally someone couldn't help it anymore. I saw one of them stand up and say, "Your Excellency Prime Minister, currently the French only give us 3 days to decide whether to withdraw troops from Tunisia. The time is tight and the Prime Minister needs to make an idea. This time it was Interior Minister Medici, one of the trio, who spoke. Everyone else breathed a sigh of relief when they heard someone speak. As the person being questioned, Caroli put down his water glass and spoke. So what do you mean? This time the answer was surprisingly unanimous. Everyone said in unison, let the Prime Minister decide. Hearing the words of the people present, Caroli couldn't help laughing. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect you all to be so united now. As an old politician, he certainly knows that this is just rhetoric. The main reason is that these people do not want to leave any excuse. After all, there were many people present. If someone revealed what happened today, it would be possible for someone else to catch on to what he said, so he would rather not express his position than leave any evidence. Seeing these people in front of him, Caroli's eyes flashed with a hint of cunning. Since it's up to me, then I will reject France's unreasonable demands, even if it means war with Italy. Prime Minister, please consider this carefully. Faced with what Caroli said, the people present quickly tried to dissuade him, including military representatives. Everyone is urging the Prime Minister to consider it carefully. Ha ha ha. Seeing that the person in front of him was frightened half to death by his words, Caroli laughed loudly. Only then did the others realize that they had been tricked by the Prime Minister, so they all stood here in embarrassment. You look at me, I look at you. Feeling like teasing them, the Prime Minister, who was in a good mood, responded at this time. Okay, I won't embarrass you. I know you want me to issue an order to withdraw the troops. Now I order the military to be responsible for withdrawing the Tunisian troops, and it must be completed within 3 days. Obey the Prime Minister. Finally, we got the result everyone wanted. Caroli signed his name under the order to withdraw his troops. He knew that this signature would definitely make him infamous in the Italian history books, but he still signed it with a natural expression. Okay, now, you can take this document and leave. Later I will announce my resignation, to make way for the impatient Depretis. I will recite the insults. Then it will depend on his ability. Come on for me. Tell him not to let me see the joke. With a small nod to the cabinet members in front of him, Caroli kicked these people out because he needed to prepare their uniforms. An hour later, news spread in Rome that Caroli had ordered the withdrawal, and at the same time Italy's 15th Prime Minister announced the resignation of his cabinet. Chapter 34. The new Prime Minister. Faced with Italy succumbing to pressure from France, European countries had different attitudes. Some were gloating about Austria. 2 years ago, France, Russia, and Italy almost formed an alliance to declare war on Austria. If it weren't for France's concerns, this war would have been fought. Woke up. And there is nothing more satisfying than seeing dog eat dog among former enemies. As for other countries, they just ignore the matter and just watch the excitement. Although more attention is paid to Italy's predicament internationally, more attention is paid to the selection of the new Prime Minister in the domestic political arena. Although popular opposition to the French occupation of Tunisia has reached a new high, everyone in the political circle knows that the matter ended the moment former Prime Minister Caroli signed the withdrawal order. Although there is still a follow-up, it is no longer important. In any case, former Prime Minister Caroli will bear the blame, and all Italy's losses in Tunisia will be recorded on him. As for the next new Prime Minister, it is still confusing to ordinary people. Several people have announced that they will compete for the position of Prime Minister. They are all well-known big names. However, in the minds of discerning people, the Prime Minister has long been determined, and that is former Prime Minister Depretis. There will be a new Prime Minister. Others are there to highlight his presence. However, although Depretis is already the candidate for the future Prime Minister, there is still something to be done, at least to make ordinary people feel that the Prime Minister is still chosen by them. Therefore, the former Prime Minister frequently appeared in front of the public to show off himself. In addition, newspapers were reporting on him, talking about his great achievements, and at the same time introducing his life. Of course, it was not without newspapers reporting on his stains, the biggest stain is its pro-French attitude, but these newspapers are basically third-rate tabloids, and no one in the mainstream media reports on it. Such large-scale publicity is of course very effective. Whether you are in a bustling city or a remote mountainous area, everyone basically knows Depretis of course. Few of these people had any influence on the Depretis election. It should be noted here that it is not easy to be eligible to vote in elections in Italy at present. First of all, you need to be Italian. In addition, you need to pay more than 25 lire every year to qualify to vote. So how many people can there be? Currently, the number of qualified people in Italy is over 400,000, accounting for a few percent of its total population. From here we can see how weak the Italian capitalist class is, and it still needs government support. Such a small base means that the election of the prime minister is very manipulative. Of course, this is not unique to Italy, it is basically the same in all European countries. Regardless of whether it is a republic, an empire, or a kingdom, it is the same. Politics can only be a sport for the few. Of course, it will be the same in the next life, but with an extra layer of disguise, making ordinary people feel that they can make decisions themselves and pay more attention to eating habits. Nowadays, everyone looks equally ugly, not to mention the eldest brother, the second brother. In addition, Depretis did not just show his face in front of the public. For him who aims to become the new prime minister, the exchange of interests is the key. During this period, Lord Depretis was also extremely busy, negotiating with various political groups. Among them, there are only 3 that he attaches most importance to, among which the Savoy family, which represents the royal power, is one of the keys. There are also centrists represented by Leslie, represented by the Speaker of Parliament, and right-wing moderates represented by the rebel trio. Depretis has also learned a lesson of his predecessor, Prime Minister Carlo. In his view, regardless of whether there is a sudden crisis in Tunisia, he will not be able to stay in power for long. Its tough attitude of suppressing various domestic factions will plant a lot of bombs for it. Although Carolo's attitude improved a lot later, his thinking of suppressing other voices has not changed, and he will still be allowed to sit in the crater as long as he is given a chance. This result will not be changed. And Depretis would not use such crude methods to make himself countless enemies. Of course, the exchange of interests is not affectionate. After all, everyone wants to maximize their own interests, so how to make reasonable arrangements becomes the key. Regarding this, Depretis believes that no one in Italy can do better than himself. Tell Brewer that his Fine Gael party is not eligible for a cabinet seat and let him think about his position. Yes, sir, I'll tell Mr. Brewer when he comes home. In his study, Depretis was talking to the old housekeeper. They are talking about a small Italian political party that is relatively well known in northern Italy. It advocates fairly good unification ideas and has 3 seats in parliament. Depretis rubbed his temples and continued to speak despite his fatigue. Has Baron Felicius come here again now? Not yet. Then contact His Excellency the Baron as soon as possible. I need to meet with him. The reason why Depretis feels urgent is that the result of the negotiation is quite different. In the previous secret discussions between Depretis and Carlo, because Carlo was still prime minister at the time, more content was about dealing with the former prime minister. After he steps down, it will involve the issue of power distribution. There is still a certain gap between the two. The condition given by Depretis was that Carlo could arrange for 2 people to join the cabinet, and Carlo's request also required 2 cabinet positions. It seems that the conditions are very consistent, but in fact there is a big difference. Because Depretis is the Secretary of Health and Education and the Secretary of the Interior, Carlo asked for either the Minister of the Interior or the Minister of Navy and Army, and the difference in weight was very large. Yes, Carlo wanted to reach out to the military. On this point, Depretis was somewhat reluctant. Although Carlo will automatically receive the support of the military when he reaches adulthood, it is not in Depretis's interest to allow Carlo to receive the support of the military prematurely, which brings the negotiations to a deadlock point. Although Depretis can form a cabinet without the support of the royal family, after all, Italy is a kingdom, and it is impossible to bypass the royal family. In addition, when Carlo becomes an adult, it will be difficult for him to deal with this matter through observations during this period. Depretis believed that His Majesty Carlo behaved very young and immature, and was not suitable for stalemate the relationship. So he had the intention to make concessions. Of course, after he gave the concession, the young majesty also needed to give reciprocal concessions, otherwise it would be quite difficult to negotiate. What Desperatiss ordered was done very quickly, and the news reached Carlo on the same day. Of course, Carlo would not refuse the kindness from Desperatiss. In fact, for Carlo, his real purpose is to get close to the military. Of course, whether it is the army or the navy, only he knows. However, this will not be an obstacle to his negotiations with Desperatiss. As long as the other party can accept his reaching out to the military, then he does not care about how many cabinet seats he has. So after several contacts, the two reached a consensus, but no one else knew the specific content. Finally, in the election of a new prime minister on June 15th, Desperatiss became Italy's 16th prime minister with a significant lead over others. The new prime minister needs to do a lot, but I believe it should not be difficult for him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 35. Can't wait. It was summer in Rome, and the crowds were much less than before, but there was still no human presence. The French played a large part in the causes of all this. Even at the Quirinal Palace, where the royal family is located, crowds of people carrying Italian flags can still be seen. On an open-air balcony of the palace, Carlo looked at the crowd of people who had been unwilling to leave for a long time and asked, "What are you doing right now, Prime Minister?" The captain of the guard stood behind Carlo. His Excellency the Baron certainly knew what Carlo wanted to ask. Prime Minister Desperatiss is currently negotiating with France. Of course Carlo knew what the captain of the guard said, and of course he was not the only one. There were so many people in Rome who were not watching every move of Desperatiss, the new prime minister. Apart from anything else, how to restore Italian interests in Tunisia is worthy of concern. But Carlo cared about different things than others. He was more concerned about the situation on the other side. How is Mr. Garibaldi doing in Palermo now? Hearing that Carlo cared about him, Baron Felicius, the captain of the guard, showed an inexplicable smile. Mr. Garibaldi may not be too happy in Palermo at the moment. After hearing the answer from the captain of the guard, Carlo asked curiously, "What's wrong, Your Majesty?" It's like this. In the story told by the captain of the guard, Carlo finally learned about the current situation of this national hero. Indeed, as he said, Garibaldi was not happy at all in Palermo. If we want to divide it by time, then the resignation of former Prime Minister Caroli is the standard. Before that, everything went very smoothly for Garibaldi in Palermo. The government not only strongly supported his rally speeches, but also provided funds to prepare for the formation of a new red shirt army. However, all this came to an abrupt end after Prime Minister Caroli resigned. After that, the national hero could not get any support from the Palermo government, whether it was financial or other aspects, all with various excuses. If you really can't find an excuse, just give it a small amount, just like squeezing out toothpaste. This made Garibaldi's work of forming the red shirt army extremely slow. Before Caroli stepped down, he had already formed a team of more than 1,500 people. By now, it is only more than 1,600 people. This can be seen from this efforts of the Palermo government. However, Garibaldi is worthy of being an Italian national hero. Relying on his unique personality charm, he still ensured that the fighting spirit and momentum of the red-shirted soldiers who were short of food and clothing remained undiminished. After Carlo listened to what the captain of the guard said, he thought for a while and then gave the order. In the name of the royal family, donate 1 million lire to Garibaldi. After hearing Carlo's order, the captain of the guard did not do it immediately as before, but hesitated and said, "Your Majesty, is this appropriate?" Faced with the dissuasion of the captain of the guard, Carlo reached out to stop what he wanted to say. "Chief Guard, I know what you want to say. Such behavior that goes against the government will bring displeasure to the government, but I have my own ideas. You can go ahead and do it." Seeing that His Majesty knew the consequences of what he had done. His Excellency the Baron stopped talking because he had fulfilled his obligations as a minister. Carlo did not look back at the departing captain of the guard, but still looked at the crowd gathering in the square against the French. Of course he is not ignorant of the consequences of speaking against the government, but he does not always speak against the government. But there are not many opportunities to make good friends with Garibaldi, and he is unwilling to give up such an opportunity. While Carlo was doing his best to make good friends with Garibaldi, Desiderius also walked out of the French embassy exhausted. The French ambassador Danida has a good relationship with him, but this time he is not just here to promote their personal relationship. Yes, this time he came to discuss protecting Italy's interests in Tunisia. Don't look at the fact that France has not taken action against Italy's industries in Tunisia before. It was just a delaying tactic to appease Italy and reduce its resistance to incorporating Tunisia into a French colony. When the Tunisian crisis is over, Italy's interests in Tunisia will not be at the mercy of the French. Although we are all European countries, this will only make France pay attention to its appearance, but it will not change France's desire to expel Italy from Tunisia. Of course, Desiderius also knows this, so he hopes to preserve Italy's interests in Tunisia as much as possible. After all, after investing hundreds of millions of lire, it is better to get back a little more. However, the negotiation with the French ambassador Danida did not go smoothly. The gap between the two was too big, which made Desiderius physically and mentally exhausted. With the help of a servant, Desiderius climbed into the carriage. Prime Minister, should we go to the Prime Minister's office now or go home? Desiderius thought for a moment and then replied, go to the Prime Minister's office. The carriage carrying him started slowly and ran towards the Prime Minister's office. Desiderius looked out the window and thought about Italy's future. Although diplomatic isolation can allow Italy to pay less attention to the outside world and focus more on domestic construction. But after experiencing the Tunisia crisis, Italy's diplomatic isolation policy can no longer go on. Whether passively or proactively, Italy must find allies in Europe. So when looking for allies, who is the most suitable candidate? If you ask Desiderius, he will tell you that Britain is the best candidate for Italy. Unfortunately, everyone knows how difficult it is to be an ally of the United Kingdom. Relying on the fact that the British Isles are separated from the mainland by the Strait and its strong national power, it has always believed in diplomatic isolation. In addition to looking for allies everywhere, in order to suppress France's hegemony in Europe during the Napoleonic period, you can see when the British have found allies at other times. Even during the Crimean War, when Britain and France jointly dealt with Russia, this was only short-lived. They formed an alliance of interests and separated immediately as soon as the peace treaty was signed after the war. Moreover, the British continental policy is not unknown, ensuring that there is no hegemon in the European continent, and anyone who takes over this position will be suppressed. Therefore, it is not difficult for Britain to become an ally, but it requires timing and luck. However, at present, Britain does not have any interest in Italy becoming an ally. Besides the United Kingdom, Italy has another choice, and that is Germany. Unlike the United Kingdom, Germany under the leadership of Bismarck is different from the United Kingdom in regard to alliances. As long as it is beneficial to Germany, then it is easy to talk about alliances. However, for Italy, there is one country that cannot be avoided in its alliance with Germany, and that is Austria. There is no need to talk about the relationship between Italy and Austria. Italy's unification can only be achieved by war with Austria. In addition, Italy and Austria still have territorial disputes so far, so the relationship between the two countries has always been tense. As for Italy's desire to form an alliance with Germany, Austria is an unavoidable topic, so Desiderius plans to test Germany's attitude first. If given the chance, Desiderius would not mind turning the feud into friendship with Austria. Of course, for him, negotiations with the French still need to be the main focus, otherwise the Italian government will not be able to devote its energy to the country, and the drought in the south has reached the point where no delay is necessary. Chapter 36 Ending. Dale, since we are all old friends, let's make it clear that our country has no thoughts about Tunisia. At present, we just hope to withdraw our investment. I became Prime Minister as a friend, you can't let me difficult to do. In a secret room of the Prime Minister's office, Desperatus, the Prime Minister, is talking to the middle-aged man in front of him. Through his title, we can know that this is the French ambassador Danny Dale, who is currently responsible for all relations with Italy. Negotiating representative, my old friend Desperatus, what you say makes it difficult for me to do, Danny. Dale continued with a troubled expression. You also know that we are a republic, and we cannot force companies to buy your industries in Tunisia. Besides, we are all civilized countries, and following business regulations is also a principle we have always adhered to. Of course, for Italy's high-quality enterprises and railways in Tunisia are looking for banks or companies to help acquire them, but there may be some discrepancies in price, probably around 80 to 90%. I hope this will not affect our friendship. Of course this will not affect our friendship, but I think there are many Chinese companies in Tunisia that are worth acquiring, not just the ones you mentioned. Then, Desperatus said pointedly, in addition, I think that as the matchmaker, you should get a reward. 5,000 is a very reasonable number. Yes, Desperatus wants to solve Tunisia's follow-up problems as soon as possible, because the drought is still continuing, and the Italian government has almost run out of funds and urgently needs to find another way. Of course, the government can also issue a treasury bond. Currently, Italian treasury bonds are quite popular in the securities market, but Desperatus needs to consider more. Borrowing money when he has just become prime minister will show that he is helpless financially. He just needs to discuss the ending of Tunisia with France, so Italy's investment in Tunisia over the years also needs to be recovered as soon as possible. In order to recover the investment as soon as possible, partial rebates have become the necessary means. 7,000. Danny. Dale acted like I'm not tired if you want to talk about this, and asked for a higher price. Dale, you have a huge appetite and it's going to make this very difficult for me. Faced with the figures proposed by Danny Dale, Desperatus did not refuse them. My request is not too much. You have to know that I can't do this alone. It needs to be managed from top to bottom. It can fall into my hands at most 2 levels. Faced with Desperatus's hesitant expression, Danny Dale expressed his difficulties. I know this, but you also need to know that our country's investment amount in Tunisia is very large. If the amount is too high, it will be difficult for me to satisfy the people, especially since I just came to power, let alone ignore public opinion. Just 5,000. How do you feel? It was clear that Desperatus felt 7,000 was inappropriate. Desperatus, this little money will make the people above me dissatisfied. You also know that Tunisia is currently under our protection, so I think 7,000 is very reasonable. This can also greatly increase the amount of the transaction. It's very beneficial to both of us. Seeing that Desperatus was unwilling to accept this figure, the French ambassador had already begun to use coercion and inducement. However, in the face of coercion and inducement, Desperatus was not easy to talk to at all. Okay, Dale, the current gap is between 2 points, and if you want to reach a consensus, you must make concessions to each other. You must realize this. Desperatus spoke slowly and calmly, his expression not changing at all. This is unacceptable to me. After saying that, Danny Dale stood up and prepared to leave. Faced with the behavior of the French ambassador, Desperatus did not take any further action, but just stood up and watched him leave. After waiting for a while, a figure opened the door and came in. Sabo, the former mayor of Rome and now the new finance minister, started walking. Prime Minister, how was the conversation with the French? The reason why Sabo is here is very simple. That is, he is a close associate of Desperatus. Of course, very few people know that they have this relationship. In addition, because Sabo is the finance minister, this negotiation is very important to the Ministry of Finance. Whether it is to relieve the drought in the south, or prepare to appease the people, nothing can be done without money. As for the former finance minister, His Excellency Jagli, with Carola's resignation, he can still retain his position. According to convention, the finance minister is basically the prime minister's person. It's not bad. The negotiation went pretty smoothly. This is not Desperatus's sarcasm. even if the French ambassador walks away. In Depretis' view, this is just a strategy of his old friend. The two countries are negotiating on the issue of hundreds of millions of lira funds. If the negotiation can be concluded within a week, it is considered to be going smoothly. How can one put forward the conditions and others immediately agree to it? Such a large amount of money always requires testing by both parties. However, although Depretis was not in a hurry, Sabo was different. He spoke with some urgency. Prime Minister, there is currently not much money in the Ministry of Finance. I'm afraid that the Ministry of Finance will not be able to get out a single lira in another half month. Faced with the anxious words of his confidant, Depretis said after thinking for a while, "Then I'll use the spare funds first. I'll have the money after I finish talking to Danny Dale." Faced with the advice given by the Prime Minister, Sabo thought for a while and then listened. "I'm already using this money. Even with this money, the government can support it for up to 1 month. You after." Hearing the words of his confidant Sabo, Depretis widened his eyes and wanted to speak, but in the end he waved his hand in frustration. "Forget it. Let's do as you say, and let as few people know as possible." "Yes, Your Excellency Prime Minister." After receiving the Prime Minister's approval, Sabo's hanging heart finally relaxed. "Be aware of using your spare funds privately. If anyone knew about it, he, the Finance Minister, would not be able to live with it." Of course, he is also very cautious about this. There are no more than one person in the Ministry of Finance who knows about this matter, and they are all confidants who have been following him for many years. Sabo, who received the secret support of the Prime Minister, left with peace of mind. But he didn't notice. Depretis stared at his back in deep thought. "It seems that I made a mistake by putting Sabo in the position of Finance Minister." "That's right. Depretis has already thought of replacing him. The reason is that he saw from this incident that Sabo's character was not suitable for the position of Minister of Finance. Of course, he would not get rid of him directly, but would replace him with the position of Minister. However, it is not easy to do this, because it is really difficult to find someone who is suitable for the position of Finance Minister, and whom you trust. There is no such person in his entourage, otherwise he would not have pushed Sabo to this position. Although Depretis wants to change people, this matter cannot be rushed. The priority now is to negotiate the Tunisian industry. As the Prime Minister expected, his old friend French Ambassador Danny Dyer did not actually end the negotiations. After secretly sending several telegrams to Paris, the old friend came uninvited and continued to have afternoon tea with the Prime Minister. Of course, although afternoon tea is delicious, it must come to an end. After drinking tea for nearly 10 days, both parties achieved acceptable results. Italian properties in Tunisia were sold by a company called Gabenli led by Mr. Danny Dale. In order to obtain Italy's consent to sell its properties in Tunisia, the company gave a guaranteed value of no less than 85% of the market price, and the company will also take a commission of 6% of the transaction amount. The structure of this little known Gabenli company is very complex. If the cocoon is peeled off, its shareholders will reveal the names of several family members of French political figures, pointing the finger at people such as Jaffelli, Gambetta and others. In any case, this is good news for Italy. At least the ongoing drought can finally receive large-scale relief from the government. And there is another piece of good news that satisfies the government, that is, it finally rained in southern Italy. Although the rain was not heavy and only affected a few areas in Sicily and Naples, this is also good news. The sign is not. It is always good to give people hope. Chapter 37 Recruiting the Red Shirts. When the government finally prepared to provide disaster relief, some people started to provide disaster relief before they could. Everyone must have guessed this. Yes, the Savoy family, as a royal family, took the lead in starting large-scale relief. Funding provided by the royal family allowed many ships to sail to southern Italian ports carrying food from all over Europe. As the king, Carlo certainly would not miss this opportunity. He personally distributed relief food to the people affected by the disaster, so that the suffering victims could feel the care and condolences from the royal family. This young majesty can be seen in Naples, Bari, Taranto and other places. God bless you, Carlo placed a piece of relief food in the hands of a hungry victim, and the expression of gratitude on his face almost overflowed. "Thank you, your merciful majesty." Thank you, your merciful majesty. After sending this victim away, Carlo continued to say the same words to the next victim, gaining another heart point. This situation lasted until sunset, and Carlo returned to his Alton manor in Palermo with his sore arms. This manor is also the property of the royal family. As for the Norman palace where his father lived before, Carlo didn't want to live there anymore because of the assassination, so he changed it. Point of course, this time Carlo paid condolences to southern Italy, and the protection work was not lax. It was simply 3 steps, 1 post, 5 steps and 1 tip. If no one had any reason to see another assassination attempt, it would be really unreasonable. Point therefore, in addition to strict security inside the manor, the police also protect the outside of the manor with the same attitude. Point of course, Carlo's kindness in distributing food to the victims will not be affected by this. Every disaster victim who can come to Carlo has undergone strict inspection to ensure that he cannot cause any harm to His Majesty the King. Point. When Carlo returned to his residence, he didn't care about his sore arms and asked the guard beside him, "Your Excellency, Chief of Guards, are you back?" "Your Majesty, the captain of the guard has not returned yet." "Then, when he comes back, call him over immediately, as you command, Your Majesty." After giving instructions to the guards, Carlo had time to take care of his arm. "Nah, come and rub my arm for me. Yesterday I found that it felt much better after you rubbed it." Following Carlo's call, the soft little maid appeared in front of him. Gentle little hand squeezed Carlo's shoulders, causing him to groan. At the same time, the light fragrance and white tenderness stimulated his senses from time to time, making him a little addicted. "Nah, yes, just pinch here. It feels so good. Don't stop. By the way, my abdomen is a little swollen. Please pinch it for me. It hurts." Naya, who was blushing, patted the part Carlo mentioned hard, making him take a breath. Dada. Just when Carlo was about to have some more fun with the maid, a knock on the door disturbed his mood. "What's up?" Faced with being disturbed, Carlo didn't care to continue fooling around with the little maid and immediately asked, "Your Majesty, the captain of the guard is back. Send him over immediately." Temporarily letting go of the opportunity to develop a relationship with his little maid Naya, Carlo immediately summoned the captain of the guard who had just returned. By the time the dusty captain of the guard appeared in front of Carlo, the little maid had already disappeared. "Chief Guard, how was this meeting?" Before the captain of the guard could speak, Carlo spoke first. Although this seems to be a slight neglect of the captain of the guard, on the other hand, it can also be seen that Carlo attaches great importance to this. "Your Majesty, I met Mr. Garibaldi this time. He is very grateful for the aid you sent, but he believes that the victims of disasters in Italy need more help from the royal family, so he said there is no need to send him funds next time. He's going to figure out how to deal with the red shirt struggles." "Then does Garibaldi agree to meet Your Majesty?" "Has he agreed?" Hearing the news, Carlo felt that his trip was worthwhile. Yes, this time he came to Palermo. Apart from disaster relief, the most important thing was to meet with Garibaldi. Because he knew that after the negotiations between Italy and France were completed, the government no longer needed Garibaldi, and he did not want to wait until the national hero was disappointed and returned to the small island of Caprera to think of a solution, because if that were the case, then everyone will pay close attention to his every move. "Did Mr. Garibaldi say when we would meet, Your Majesty?" "The sooner I follow your instructions, the better, so we have made an appointment to meet tomorrow morning." "Well, I will announce to the public tomorrow that I will take a rest, and I will go to see Lord Garibaldi." After a night of nothing, Palermo started a new day of life the next day. King Carlo, who lives in Alton Manor, announced that he would have a day off at the manor today, which relieved the police chief responsible for peripheral security work. After all, for him, His Majesty's safety is the first priority, and he does not want to follow in the footsteps of his predecessor. But he didn't know that the person he needed to protect was no longer here. Some street in Palermo is home to ordinary people, so it has a strong atmosphere of life. The children playing on the street, the woman washing clothes at the well, and the vendors hawking on the street create a picture full of life. Carlo sat in the carriage and looked at this picture in trance. The carriage he rode in was very ordinary. It didn't have any patterns to represent the family's logo. It was just like the carriages used by ordinary people. However, although the carriages are the same, the people are different. The driver driving the carriage is very powerful at first glance. The carriage didn't walk on the street for long and soon turned into an alley. The scene here is different. Many young people gather here and the queue is getting longer. Your Majesty, this is the red shirt army recruiting people. Mr. Garibaldi is waiting for you inside. I see. The carriage stopped at a small door on the side. After the captain of the guard, Baron Filmicki, got out of the car with Carlo, he signaled to a man standing at the small door and they walked in. The scene is different. As soon as you enter, there are a sea of people here, but they are all busy with their own things under the leadership of the captain of the guard. Carlo and his party passed through them and came to a room on the 3rd floor. After a knock on the door, Carlo finally saw the national hero again. Hello, Mr. Garibaldi. Nice to meet you. Hello, Your Majesty. Forgive me for not being able to pick you up in person. After all, there are a lot of people talking here. It wouldn't be good if I attract attention. It doesn't matter. I won't care about it. After greeting Garibaldi, Carlo continued to speak enthusiastically to another person beside him. Mr. Cosenz, it's nice to see you here. I know that a true Italian can never accept the pain that others impose on it. Yes, it was Garibaldi's friend Cosenz who deserved Carlo's words. Nice to meet you, Your Majesty. I wonder if Your Majesty is anxious to see us this time. Is there anything important? After all, he was Garibaldi's right-hand man. As soon as Cosenz arrived, he asked Carlo about the purpose of his trip. There is indeed something urgent that I want to inform you about. Carlo organized his words and then spoke. Are you aware of the secret negotiations currently underway between the government and the French? Before the two of them could answer, Carlo knew the answer from their surprised expressions. Although the affairs of Prime Minister Despertis were very confidential, how could it be hidden from Carlo's eyes? As a royal family, the Savoy family was extremely well informed in Rome. As expected, the two of them were shocked and answered in unison. We don't know, Your Majesty. Can you tell me what's going on? Carlo told the two of them about Prime Minister Despertis' attempt to divest Italy of its industries in Tunisia, and their expressions became more and more serious as they listened to his words. The two of them are not fools. If the government has negotiated with the French, then Garibaldi's formation of the Red Shirt Army will be very embarrassing, because this kind of action without government support is bound to fail. Although Garibaldi doesn't care about failure, no one will be happy to see the government stab itself in the back. And Garibaldi, who was used to being stabbed, was also unwilling to see such a result. Moreover, this is not the time of the unification war, so he can give money to others as he wishes. Now facing France, Garibaldi has a complicated heart. But no matter how complicated it is, as an Italian, he must be on Italy's side. Your Majesty, thank you for informing us. This will give us time to prepare. The personal thank you from the national hero did not satisfy Carlo, so he only asked one more question. Sir, may I ask what you are going to do? Facing Carlo's inquiry, Garibaldi looked at each other and said after his old friend, what else can we do? We can only dismiss them and let them go home. Garibaldi's words made Carlo happy. Wasn't he coming to Palermo just to show up at this time? Both of you. It would be too wasteful to let the Red Shirt Army be disbanded like this. Think about it. These young people who are full of love for Italy in their hearts, after many hardships, were told that they were going to be disbanded. This will hit them, and it will also hit them hard. To all those who are proud of being red-shirted, I think this is not good at all. Facing Carlo's impassioned speech, the two old men who had gone through many hardships did not know that the young Majesty in front of them had other ideas. Although I don't know what His Majesty has in mind, he seems to be pretty good after several contacts, so Cosenz didn't wait for his old friend to speak before speaking to give him a chance. Your Majesty, what do you think should be done now that Cosenz has given himself a chance? Carlo of course needs to seize it. I also know the current difficulties of the red shirts. The main reason is that the government is no longer willing to provide human and material support. And as the government reaches an agreement with France, although the public still maintains a high voice of opposition, the government will no longer provide support. This is very detrimental to the Red Shirt Army, and I don't want to see it. I think it is important to ensure that the Red Shirt Army is a team with historical heritage, which is also important to the kingdom, so I hope that the Red Shirt Army can be retained. Come down. Hearing this, Cossens couldn't help but speak, but, Your Majesty, don't you consider the military's attitude? Why the Red Shirt Army was disbanded several times was because of the military's hostility to this regime that was not under its control, and of course because of Garibaldi's strong republican ideas. When Cossens pointed this out directly, he also wanted to see how Carlo would resolve the military's opposition to this situation. Don't worry, I have given full consideration to the military's attitude. I think integrating the red shirts into the guard system will reduce the military's opposition. The guard Carlo mentioned is led by both the military and the royal family. Of course, the Italian guards are not as large as Russia. Currently there are only 2 regiments with less than 7,000 troops. They are stationed in Rome and are mainly responsible for defending royal family. When Carlo said this, he couldn't help but ask, "Can I ask how many red shirts there are now?" There are currently 1,836 red shirts. Very good, Carlo said, very satisfied with this number. If there were too many red shirts, it would be difficult for him to arrange them. I think the formation of the 3rd Guards Regiment will not disgrace the reputation of the Red Shirt Army. Faced with Carlo's conditions, Cossens and Garibaldi looked at each other before the national hero spoke. "Thank you for your majesty's interest in the Red Shirt Army, but this matter is of great importance and we need to consider it." Facing Garibaldi's answer, Carlo nodded in agreement. He had no intention of being agreed to on the spot, but he still couldn't help but ask, "There is no problem with this, but can I ask how long it will take to consider? How many days will your majesty stay in Palermo?" "I'll stay 3 more days, then we will give his majesty an accurate answer in 3 days." After getting satisfactory results, Carlo chatted with the 2 for a while and then left. In order to avoid attracting attention, Garibaldi and Cossens did not see Carlo off. After Carlo's carriage left, the 2 of them looked away. "What do you think of his majesty Carlo's suggestion?" Cossens was the first to ask out of breath. "I have no idea." The gray-haired old man faced his friend's question and answered helplessly. The confusion in his eyes was visible to everyone. Although he had been mentally prepared for this outcome, he found that he was still unable to bear it when it actually arrived. Why is it so difficult if you want to serve your country, but when it comes to the future of the boys, he doesn't plan to make a direct decision? "It doesn't matter what I think. Let's ask the boys for their opinions. They follow me with full expectations and trust me. I can't selfishly make decisions for them." It seems that the government's decision this time has broken the heart of the national hero again, but Cossens has no good solution for this. Although his old friend has extremely high prestige among the people, the government and military's fear of him has not been reduced at all. It may take until his old friend dies to stop guarding him like a thief. Garibaldi was also a resolute person. Once he made a decision, he had to carry it out. In the evening of that day, he summoned all the red shirts, informed them of the situation, and then let them decide for themselves. Carlo was very satisfied with the result. 1,513 of the 1,836 people chose to join the guards. Carlo was not made to wait any longer. The next day, Garibaldi sent someone to inform Carlo of the result, which made him unable to resist. He picked up the little maid next to him and vented his joy. Even though the little maid's white and tender hands were beating Carlo's chest, she didn't make him want to put it down. Whether it was Carlo's involuntary or intentional behavior, he didn't know, but he just felt that it felt good. Carlo stayed for another day. After leaving the captain of the guard to solve the remaining problems, he returned to Rome. He still had plans to make. Chapter 38 to ships patrolling. Carlo returned to Rome with joy, but when he returned to the palace, his mood immediately changed. "You said the 2 ministers are waiting for me." "Yes, your majesty, they have been waiting outside for a while." "Waiting for Carlo was none other than the two ministers of the Navy and the Army, the Secretary of the Navy, Admiral Anthony Gorek, and the Minister of the Army, Admiral Saragut. I didn't expect them to respond so quickly. Carlo didn't need to think about it to know what these two people were here for. Wasn't it just to accept the red shirts? There was such a big reaction from just over 1,000 people, which made Carlo know the thorny nature of this matter. Sure enough, when the two ministers arrived, they were talking about the problem of the red shirts. Your Majesty, I heard that you are recruiting thousands of people in Palermo to form the 3rd Guards Regiment. Faced with the inquiry from General Saragut, Secretary of War, Carlo did not deny it at all. That's what happened, Your Majesty. The establishment of a new Guards Regiment level establishment will put pressure on military expenditures. I hope Your Majesty will consider this matter carefully, since Carlo did not deny it. General Saragut, as the spokesman of the army, naturally did not want to see the sudden appearance of the 3rd Guards Regiment, and directly used military expenses to argue. As expected of the military, he speaks directly. Is there still a shortage of military expenses for one regiment? Facing Admiral Saragut's attack, Carlo asked rhetorically point unexpectedly. As soon as I asked, the Minister of War immediately complained. Your Majesty, the army is really short of money at the moment. Every penny of military expenditure has been allocated for its use. Suddenly a regiment level establishment will cost at least millions of lire. It is impossible for the government to solve this cost for the military at present. Our military alone is simply not capable of solving this problem. Listening to what General Saragut said so eloquently, Carlo didn't believe at all that the military couldn't even squeeze out more than 1 million lire. If this is the case, then I will ask the government to solve the funding problem. Faced with the rhetoric given by General Saragut, Carlo planned to ask the government to solve this problem, believing that Prime Minister Depretis would spend more than 1 million for himself. Seeing that the funding trick didn't work, Admiral Saragut was already mentally prepared, so he continued. Your Majesty, now that the cost issue has been solved, there is no big problem. However, the newly established 3rd Guards Regiment lacks a chief officer with sufficient military capabilities. I think personnel can be sent from the military to help it form an army as soon as possible. That's right. Seeing that the funds could not support the establishment of the 3rd Guards Regiment, the military planned to use a trick of adding sandpoint. As long as the main officers of the 3rd Guards Regiment are replaced by military personnel, there will be enough means to transform it into a force of the military. How could Carlo, who was well versed in history, not understand General Saragut's intentions? He was not willing to see the military's attempt to mix sand with it. If he agreed, why would he go through all the trouble? The reason why he got this army from Garibaldi was because he saw that it was not affected by the habits of the army, so that he could take a fancy to him. So Admiral Saragut's idea was immediately politely rejected by Carlo. No need for that. I believe in the ability of the future military commander of the 3rd Regiment. Seeing that one after another of his plans were rejected by His Majesty, Admiral Saragut winked at Admiral Gorek at the side, trying to get him to speak for him. General Gorek, who was harassed by the Minister of War's eyes, felt helpless. Originally, he didn't want to come at all. What did the red shirts have to do with the Navy? These people didn't know how to get on the ship to operate the cannon. It's just that General Saragut dragged him alive and forcefully pulled him here. But after all, he was a bit sorry for the situation, so Admiral Anthony Gorek still gave an idea. Your Majesty, I don't know much about the 3rd Guards Regiment, but I know that the Navy has very high requirements for personnel. Many soldiers need to be carefully selected, otherwise training will be more effective with half the effort. Although General Gorek did not say it clearly, General Saragut, who was the Minister of War, could not understand its intention and immediately took over the words. Your Majesty, Admiral Gorek is right. The guards are responsible for protecting Your Majesty and Rome, and their officers and soldiers must be carefully selected. Therefore, please allow the military to send people to strictly inspect them, and not let them be ignored. They have ruined the reputation of the guards. Facing Admiral Saragut's continuous search for opportunities, Carlo was a little bit dumbfounded, but he also needed to think carefully when facing the two admirals. After all, it is not a wise move for Carlo to refute the opinions of the military one after another. He wants to improve the combat effectiveness of the army, but does not want to have a stalemate with the military. Although he can still refuse, looking at General Sarragute's posture, he will definitely continue to propose, which is not good point. So Carlo thought for a while and then spoke. Then let's follow your advice. Before Admiral Sarragute showed a satisfied expression. He gave up the thought he shouldn't have. However, this time the 3rd Guards Regiment is formed. The number of people should not be too small. A maximum of 200 people will be eliminated. I will have someone accompany your people to check. It was obvious that Carlo would not give General Sarragute a chance to make excuses, and seeing Carlo criticize his idea, General Sarragute was not angry. This matter cannot be rushed. After His Majesty loses interest in the Red Shirt Army, he will have many ways to deal with the remnants of these Red Shirt Army. Seeing that the matter was barely settled, Admiral Gorek breathed a sigh of relief and was about to leave with Admiral Sarragute when he heard His Majesty's words to persuade him to stay. Admiral Gorek, please stay for a while. Despite Admiral Sarragute's curious eyes, Admiral Gorek stayed. Admiral Gorek, I asked you to stay because I have some matters regarding warships that I need to consult. Facing Admiral Gorek's somewhat confused expression, Carlo spoke up and told him why he wanted to keep him. Upon hearing that Carlo wanted to ask about warships, Admiral Gorek, who had been dealing with warships for most of his life, immediately became confident. Your Majesty, may I ask? I wonder what Your Excellency, the Admiral, thinks of warships like armored cruisers. Faced with Carlo's question about the armored cruiser, Admiral Garlic could immediately tell him that he was ugly. Your Majesty, although our country is not equipped with armored cruisers, we still know a little bit about them. Generally speaking, armored cruisers are a last resort choice for countries with weak naval strength, because cruisers are not naturally suitable for battle lines. So enhance its armor as an emergency measure. Carlo was greatly disappointed by Admiral Garlic's words. It was obvious that Admiral Gorek had mentioned the shortcomings of the armored cruiser, but not its advantages. Of course, only a few naval admirals in the world now understand the main point, that is, those who cannot defeat me are not as fast as me, and those who are faster than me cannot defeat me. It is obvious that the characteristics of the armored cruiser are very suitable for breaking up engagements and blocking the enemy's maritime transportation lines. At the same time, it can also contain the enemy's large maritime forces. Since the old admiral didn't understand, Carlo didn't mind explaining it to him. I think armored cruisers do more than that, so. A later generation keyboard warrior gave the old general some knowledge about the role of armored cruisers, which made the old general's eyes light up. I didn't expect that His Majesty knew so much about the Navy. It looks like the future of the Navy will be in good hands. What a surprise point. But the surprises didn't stop there. While Admiral Garlic was still thinking about it, when he asked the Navy to build one next year, Carlo, as the king, gave him a surprise. As the King of Italy, I feel very sad about France's rudeness in the Tunisian crisis. I plan to help the Navy build 2 armored cruisers at the royal family's expense. Really, Your Majesty? Faced with such an unexpected surprise, the old admiral couldn't sit still. Although Italy ranked 4th in the world's navy, who would think that it had too many ships? Besides, Italy needs to face the pressure of France and Austria, not to mention Austria. Well, the French Navy occupies the 2nd largest position in the world, which puts a lot of pressure on the Navy. Admiral Gorek wished to have this kind of unexpected surprise every year. His heart could bear it, so in order to prevent himself from hearing wrongly, he asked one more time to confirm. That's right, 2 armored cruisers. As he spoke, Carlo stretched out 2 fingers and made a gesture in front of Admiral Gorek's eyes. Everyone knows what these 2 patrol ships are doing. Chapter 39, a show of force. Although it has been promised to add 2 armored cruisers to the Navy, it is impossible to negotiate the specific construction now. Apart from anything else, the construction cost of 2 armored cruisers is at least 20 million lire, and we need to wait for Carlo to raise part of it. In addition, he also has some ideas about building the armored cruiser Carlo, but he has to wait until he communicates with the designers before he can let them know his ideas. Of course, Some preliminary preparations still need to be made, but Admiral Gorak will take over these. But don't forget that these two ships were built for the Italian Navy. He will definitely be more anxious than Carlo. In fact, Carlo has already had preliminary ideas about these two Italian first armored cruisers, because there is no other choice. The Garibaldi class armored cruiser is very good, equipped with thousands of pieces of equipment on a ship of more than 8,000 tons. It is equipped with tons of equipment for patrolling, and the speed is not slow. It can be said to be a classic. Of course, Italy cannot build the Garibaldi class now. Not only the power system is different, but also there are no rapid fire cannons. This is a bit of a headache, but I believe there is a way to solve it. We can't build a complete version. A shrunken version is also fine. Wait until Carlo has a chat with the Navy designer General Saragut, who was the Minister of War, was unaware of Carlo's desire to sponsor the Navy. After he hurriedly returned to the War Ministry, he immediately gathered people to prepare to give the Red Shirt troops who arrived in Rome a show of power. So when the excited former Red Shirt army members arrived in Rome, they were immediately pulled to the military camp before they had a chance to see the capital. Ciampino military camp is located 20 kilometers south of Rome. This military camp is stationed with a regiment of Italian troops. However, today, a team different from Italian blue military uniforms appeared in the military camp. Its bright red color made many officers and soldiers in the military camp feel a little dazzling. Yes, these are the future officers and soldiers of the 3rd Guards Regiment, but they are not in good condition. Everyone was sweating and panting. No way. Anyone who runs from the port to Ciampino without being out of breath will be given a thumbs up and said, "Good man." The distance between the two was 40 kilometers, and it took them a long time to reach it. Now prepare to assemble and count the number of people. The leading officer immediately began to prepare the team after they rested for a while. Cossens, these officers really don't give people a chance to rest. Chowdhury, stop talking and get ready to assemble. The full name of the man called Cossens is Holden Cossens. Yes, he is the son of the old Cossens, and the other man named Chaudhry is his good friend. The two joined the team when Garibaldi was red-shirting in Palermo. Relying on their respective strengths, the two served as temporary squad leaders. After being recruited by Carlo, their duties were still not relieved. Before the two of them could think about their future in Rome, after getting off the ship, they were asked to lead the team and run to Ciampino. According to these nostril reading officers, they, rookies, don't know how to fight, so they don't need to be taught how to run away. So, after they got off the boat and had a meal, they immediately started running away. And Cossens had to admit that these officers who looked at people with their nostrils were really outstanding. These officers had been running with them when they were still running and didn't even want to say anything. These officers could still treat them ridicule and enthusiasm. And it's all like, you guys can also be called red shirts. I think Lord Garibaldi can't find anyone at your speed. My grandma can run faster than you. If you were my soldiers, I would die of shame. These sarcastic words made many people angry. In order not to be looked down upon by these officers, they gritted their teeth and ran all the way to Ciampino. When the officers shouted to assemble, these former red shirt army personnel immediately gathered into a queue quickly. In Palermo, they trained a lot, so they were able to cope with this situation. However, after they were assembled, the officers did not give them any instructions, but instead asked them to continue waiting. But soon they knew why. They saw stragglers from the original red shirt army running towards them one after another. It was obvious that these officers were asking them to wait for the stragglers. The sun in June made people feel very uncomfortable, but these officers stood with them, so no one wanted to complain, and they just gritted their teeth and persisted. As for those who were left behind, they also let them go and let them automatically join the queue. Only the officer looked at his watch from time to time, as if waiting for something. About half an hour later, the leading officer spoke. No need to wait. Count now. 1 2 3. The number of people counted stayed at 1417. And at this time someone ran in again. Stop, you're eliminated. The sweaty former red shirt member looked helplessly at the officer's merciless words. I said you were eliminated. Can't you hear what I said? The officer loudly announced that he had been eliminated, causing a commotion in the team. Many people know this person. He is the son of a cook in Palermo. His name is Adabari. He is a kind-hearted little fat man. Many people are very angry when faced with this situation and want to ask why but someone moved faster than them. Report. I have a question. Someone in the team spoke loudly. It was Haldane Cossens, and this little fat guy named Adderberry was a member of his team. An officer immediately came to him, stared at him and asked, "Tell me, what's the problem? Why?" He was eliminated because he timed out. As far as I know, the army has clear time regulations for long distance emergency marches, but this time has not reached this time at all. Cossens's words caused a commotion in the team. If the officers could not give a reason, then maybe a storm of resistance was coming. The officer leading the team obviously knew this, and he shouted an order. "Stand still, don't move." When the line died down, he walked up to Cossens. "Tell me your name." The officer's words caused a flash of worry in the eyes of many people. But Cossens was not afraid at all, and he answered loudly, "My name is Haldane Cossens, sir." The leading officer immediately spoke loudly in his ear. "Very good, I remember you. Don't you want to know why? I will tell you now. Because what I implement is not the uniform standard in the military, but the standard of our guards. The whole journey is 43 kilometers, and we are close to even the new recruits of the guard should be able to finish the run within 5 hours, and we also need to carry weapons and ammunition. It takes more than 5 hours for you to run empty-handed. Such soldiers should not appear in our guards. Now you understand." "Answer me." "Understood, sir." The words of the leading officer calmed down all the dissatisfaction of the team, and Cossens could only say sorry to the little fat man in his heart. "I can't help you." "Do you still have any questions now?" "No more, sir." The leading officer immediately walked in front of everyone, looked at them and continued. "My name is Stefan Caesar, and all new recruits of the guards will be trained by me. In addition, I have a nickname called Hell Instructor. I hope you like my nickname." After he finished speaking, he smiled like a rookie, which made many people shudder inwardly. It seems that some of them will suffer. Chapter 40 Venice-class armored cruiser, Part 1. Carlo did not know what happened to the recruits of the 3rd Guards Regiment formed by the Red Shirts, but even if he knew it, he couldn't do anything. He sent people to keep an eye on him, so the military couldn't go too far, and besides, they still limited the number of people to be eliminated. Now Carlo has more important things to do, and that is the work of loading and patrolling to ships waiting for him. After he promised the Navy to pay for the construction of 2 patrol ships, Admiral Garlock, as the Minister of the Navy, worked very diligently. From time to time, he came to tell Carlo how the progress was going, which even attracted curious inquirers from the Prime Minister. But when he learned that Carlo was planning to purchase 2 more warships for the Navy, his expression was truly wonderful. Because this was something Carlo did with royal funds, he, as Prime Minister, could not do anything about it. I can only sigh that there is nothing else to say, except that the royal family is really rich. Since he was going to spend a lot of money, Carlo didn't want to hide it, and openly announced it. The people loudly applauded the king for spending his personal money to help the Navy build ships, which also brought Carlo's reputation to a new high. It was not that high originally, of course. Newspapers added a lot to Carlo's life. In these newspapers, Carlo was described as a young and heroic king who was unwilling to accept the status quo in the face of foreign oppression. He spent all his money to add 2 warships to the Navy. This kind of story is what the people like to hear and see. Since Carlo has shouldered such expectations, he will definitely do something that meets their expectations. So in the next period of time, Carlo frequently appeared in major newspapers. Although he did not make remarks that surprised the world like Wang Shiqiang, his presence was greatly enhanced. Although he appeared frequently in newspapers, Carlo did not forget his mission. After Admiral Gorek reported that the preparations were almost complete, he came to the Admiralty. The Admiralty building located at number 16 Mondovka Street shows a Renaissance style. The 3 buildings are arranged in a zigzag shape. The logo of the Royal Navy is clearly visible on the building, showing the extraordinary spirit of the Navy. The Italian Navy was formerly the Navy of the Kingdom of Sardinia. In 1861, the maritime fleets of the Kingdom of Sardinia, the Kingdom of Two Sicilies, and the Kingdom of Piedmont merged to form the Royal Italian Navy. Currently, the Italian Navy has 87 combat ships with a total tonnage of 287,000 tons. Ranked 4th in the world. However, regardless of the current tonnage of Italian warships, most of the current Italian warships were built in the 1960s. After the Lys naval battle with Austria, the Navy's funding was significantly reduced. Despite this, the Italian Navy still built a number of warships with sufficiently superior performance. Among them, the representative works are the Tullio and Enrico Donalo. This class has cancelled all sales, and is equipped with twin propellers. It is powered by a vertical compound steam engine. The power of 12,000 horsepower is enough to allow this giant ship of more than 12,000 tons to reach a speed of 14.8 knots, which is also quite good in Europe. These two warships were the most powerful warships in the world when they were built. Their 450 mm 20 caliber naval guns were capable of dealing with all warships. However, its construction spanned a long period of time. Construction started in 1873 and was not completed until 1880. After it was completed, it was somewhat mediocre. The rate of fire of its main gun, 1 round every 5 minutes, is also impressive. The Navy discovered during the exercise that, although the ship is powerful, it still has various shortcomings, such as its main gun that fires every 5 minutes, and the ship's main battery's firing range is insufficient. The Tullio class has 3 chimneys. The 2 turrets are located between the first and second chimneys, and between the second chimney and the third chimney. The picture is so beautiful, I think. Although the Tullio class has various shortcomings, it still represents a huge progress in Italian shipbuilding technology. At present, the Navy has decided to make some modifications to the Tullio class to address its shortcomings, and continue the idea of building 3 improved ships. Carlo was not unaware of this. However, he didn't have many suggestions for the current ideas of the Italian Navy. Firstly, he didn't know much, and secondly, the time was wrong and the technology was not up to paragraph. Even if he talks about the concept of the dreadnought ship, it is impossible to get the Navy's approval, because this is simply not realistic at present point. So this time Carlo came to the Navy department. He only wanted to choose a good plan for his armored cruiser. Yes, this time it is a tender for Carlo's 2 armored cruisers. Because no one in the Navy has designed armored cruisers, this time the Navy plans to brainstorm ways to choose the most suitable plan for construction. Of course, perhaps the construction costs funded by the royal family also played a big role in this. After all, this can bring the relationship between the Navy and the King closer, so the Navy did not conduct internal bidding, but instead convened major shipyards to conduct bidding. At present, the Navy Ministry has already sent bidding requirements to major shipyards. According to the requirements of the Ministry of the Navy, this Italian cruiser must have a speed of more than 18 knots and sufficient firepower. In addition, the protection requirements are to be able to withstand the bombardment of 150mm naval guns, and the tonnage must not exceed 6,500 tons. Faced with the requirements of the Ministry of the Navy, major shipyards have prepared their own plans, and are gearing up to win Italy's first cruise ship. Faced with such a bidding situation, the Navy might not invite Carlo. After all, it is the Royal Navy, and besides, this is still paid for by the King. So after Carlo walked into the bidding conference hall, Admiral Garlock, as the Minister of the Navy, immediately announced that the bidding had begun. Carlo was not allowed to say a few words, and he had no intention of saying more. He was worthy of being a capable soldier. Following Gorek's opening, the bidding meeting began immediately. The first person to come forward was from the Venice Naval Shipyard. This shipyard affiliated with the Navy has strong strength. The Tullio class battleship was built by this shipyard. I saw the person in charge of the shipyard coming up with his own plan. Your Majesty, everyone here, the design plan of our Tunisian shipyard is that the length of the ship is 106 meters, the width is 14.7 meters, and the draft is 7.1 meters. The standard displacement is 6450 tons, and the full load displacement is 7130 tons. In terms of firepower, we have prepared 2 203mm main guns for it, which are installed into X1 on the front class A fort. On the rear deck, we have installed 4 152mm secondary main guns. In addition, there are 8 120mm guns. They are arranged on both sides of the middle of the warship. In addition, in order to deal with small and civilian targets, we also installed 8 57mm guns to deal with these targets. In addition, the ship also installed a 5x 18-inch torpedo launch tube behind the island. For power, we use a 10,000 horsepower reciprocating steam engine with a maximum speed of 18 knots. The maximum range is 5,700 nautical miles / 10 knots. We use flat armor for the armor, including 100mm of main armor belt, 50mm of horizontal armor, 57mm of command tower armor, and 57mm of gun mount armor. The person in charge of the Venice Naval Shipyard said a lot. Although it sounded good, even Carlo, who didn't know much about the Navy, felt something was wrong. After thinking for a long time, he finally knew what the problem was. Such a firepower configuration is similar to that of a protected cruiser. It is obvious that the Venetian Naval Shipyard did not understand the essence of an armored cruiser. Since Carlo felt it, Admiral Garlock, as the head of the Navy, could naturally feel it too. So he waited for the person in charge of the Venice shipyard to finish speaking before speaking. We have learned about the plan of the Venice shipyard, so please ask the next person in charge of the Andesha shipyard to come up with a plan. As Admiral Garlick finished speaking, a young man who seemed to be still clinging to the tale of his youth stood up. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, the slightly young designer said with some embarrassment, "I'm Vittorio Cuniberti, the designer of the Andesha shipyard. Next, I will explain our shipyard's plan to you. I checked a lot of information, so I posted it late. I will try to publish the next chapter before 12 o'clock. Chapter 41, Venice Class Armored Cruiser, Part 2. No one at the scene showed any impatience with the young designer's self-introduction. It wasn't that the designer was so great, but that the Andesha shipyard behind it was famous in Italy. The plant is one of the largest shipyards in Italy. Compared with other shipyards, the Andesha shipyard has a greater reputation among the people because it ranks among the Italian shipyards in terms of both cost and delivery speed. It is at the forefront, so its private shipbuilding orders are almost piling up, and many foreign maritime merchants even go to the shipyard to order ships. Although it can make a living by relying on private orders, it does not mean that Andesha shipyard is poor in military ships. It has built more than 10 battleships of various types such as the battleship of Onditor, the battleship Roma, the cruiser Genoa, etc., which fully demonstrates its strength in military ships. Andesha shipyard actually dares to send a young man here, which is enough to prove his ability. However, although most people recognize Andesha's strength because of the shipyard, there are always some who can't stand it. Boy, on behalf of the Andesha shipyard, you can call your adults to come out. Isn't this old guy Bryn afraid of being embarrassed? An old designer in his 50s was shouting loudly at Vittorio Cuniberti. This was a big deal. He was Bernardo Bran, the current Giulio level designer. Although he was not well known in later generations, he is now famous in Italy. He and Benedetto Brin are considered the two most outstanding warship designers in Italy. Since they are called together, there must always be a distinction, so the relationship between the two is not harmonious at all, and they have repeatedly argued with each other. Bernardo Bran previously had an advantage in naval battleship design, and now the Navy plans to build 3 more ships, after improving on the shortcomings discovered in the Dorio class, so it especially wants to see Benedetto Brin's frustrated expression, and this time Benedetto Brin actually dared not to come, so Vittorio Cuniberti could only bear the pain for him, who made Brin the chief designer of the Andesha shipyard. Where is the teacher? Seeing that the young man Vittorio Cuniberti didn't speak, Bernardo Bran felt that bullying young people was boring. Maybe it would be bad if it was reported that he was bullying a newcomer, but no one expected that this young man named Vittorio Cuniberti immediately taught everyone a lesson. Everyone, I have brought the design plan of Andesha shipyard. First of all, we need to understand the role of the armored cruiser. As the name suggests, the armored cruiser is a cruiser with reinforced armor. It looks very simple, but it is not like this. Maybe someone wants to ask, this is a warship bidding site. I'm wasting everyone's time by giving you popular science here. I want to explain it here, because if you don't understand these concepts, the warships you launch will not meet the requirements. When it comes to warship design, this young man named Cuniberti speaks clearly and logically about his ideas. Although Carlo didn't know much about warship design, he found that no one at the bidding site refuted what the young man said, which showed that his speaking skills were very good. Even Nadto Bran, who had just mocked him, did not mock him. After a brief introduction, he finally revealed the design plan for the Andesha shipyard. Our current design plan is as follows. The armored cruiser plan has a total length of 105.7 meters, waterline length 99.0 meters, width 18.0 meters, displacement of 6850 tons, standard 7460 tons, full load, draft 7 meters, standard 7.5 meters, fully loaded. For power, we use two upright 3-stage expansion 3-cylinder reciprocating steam engines with dual shaft propulsion. The maximum output power is 13,000 horsepower and the maximum speed is 18.6 knots. Endurance, about 10 knots/6,000 nautical miles. It is equipped with 4 254mm 30 times caliber main guns in a 2x1 front and rear 2x1 layout, 6 152mm secondary guns in a 6x1 layout, and is also equipped with 8 75mm and 4 57mm guns. The main protection belt is 5-inch armor, which extends from the waterline to the middle deck. The bow and stern waterline armor is 80mm, and the turret is 152mm. In addition, we have optimized the anti-sinkability by combining the waterline armor belt with the dome armor, and designed the middle to be a coal bunker. Even if the main armor is penetrated, not much water can enter. In addition, our plan adopts a subdivided compartment design. The entire ship is divided into 32 watertight areas, with a total of 228 watertight compartments. Faced with the plan revealed by Cuniberti, many people present were shocked. Is it possible to install such a tonnage, install so much firepower, and have very good speed and armor? For many people on the scene, they couldn't do it. Because everyone knows something about warship design, they know how difficult it is to achieve a balance between the 3. It is not that there are no objections. As two outstanding designers in Italy, Nadto Bran has his own pride. However, he failed to find any major flaws in it, making it difficult for him to attack young people. But that was not necessarily the case for others. Why is this ship equipped with so many artillery pieces, and it can run so fast? This is unscientific. You use a triple expansion steam engine. Have you considered its reliability? For facing the numerous inquirers at the scene, Cuniberti tried his best to choose reasonable answers. As for those who were critical, he had no time to deal with them now. This caused the venue to be interrupted for a while, and there were many inquiries from officers. After everything subsided, the Navy's bidding meeting continued. However, at this time, many shipyards lost confidence after comparing the plans from Andesha shipyard. I went on stage and came down after speaking for a few times. Therefore, the second half of the bidding meeting immediately became boring, and Carlo also felt bored watching it. At this time, he saw Vittorio Cuniberti, who represented Andesha shipyard, and summoned him. Although he didn't know that this man would be the designer of the Garibaldi class in the future, and he was also the proposer of the Dreadnought class who proposed a unified caliber all-heavy main gun point, but Carlo felt that the young designer was not simple at all, so he asked him to talk to him about the solutions he provided. Mr. Cuniberti, don't be nervous, just think of us as friends. Seeing that the young man in front of him, who had the same name as his brother, but a different surname, was a little nervous, Carlo first spoke to persuade him. He likes to make friends with talented people. Okay, Your Majesty, I have some doubts about your shipyard's plan. Can I point it out? No problem, Your Majesty, please speak. Seeing Carlo changed the topic to warship design, Cuniberti immediately lost his nervousness. Why not cancel the collision angle? I feel that with the advancement of technology, the speed and firepower of warships are changing rapidly. It is completely unrealistic to ram and sink the opponent, and the impact will also cause damage to itself. This design is somewhat unreasonable. Facing Carlo's question, Cuniberti glanced at the naval officer on the side and gave an explanation in a low voice. It turned out to be the Battle of Lissa. After the Italia was rammed and sunk by the Austro-Hungarian Maximilian, Italian naval designers deliberately added a collision angle, and the Navy also acquiesced in this design point. After listening to Cuniberti's explanation, Carlo said without hesitation, "Then cancel it. This design also affects the speed." He knew that the Battle of Lissa was the last naval battle in which ramming tactics were used. At other times, the collision angle might injure others, such as the Yoshino, and the Yoshino. In addition to this design plan, why not place the three chimneys more compactly, Your Majesty? This will increase the area hit by the bullet, and the power chamber below cannot be made smaller. Although it will increase the area hit by bullets, it can save the upper floor area and help improve the living environment of officers and soldiers. Let me think about this. During the exchange between Carlo and Cuniberti, the bidding meeting ended, and as expected, Andisha Shipyard won the order for 2 ships to be installed in Patrol Point. The Navy named it the Venice-class armored cruiser, and its design plan, after Carlo's suggestion, cancelled the collision angle, made the 3 chimneys more compact, and only had one main pole behind the command tower, and the lines are smoother, making it look like a work of art. However, the problem this brings is that the cost is relatively high. 2 Venice-class ships are installed and patrolled, and the Andisha shipyard has quoted a cost of 24 million liras, cost of £430,000 per ship. But this is not a problem for Carlo. Someone will pay for these 2 battleships finally written at point. In addition, don't think it can't fit. Italy equipped the cruiser Etna with 2 254mm guns, with a displacement of 3881 tons. It was launched in 1885. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 40, To the Olive Branch That No One Wants to Accept. Part 1. Carlo's construction of 2 patrol ships for the Navy aroused enthusiastic responses in Italy. As one of the parties involved, the Navy was naturally extremely happy about this. Not only did they pick up 2 new ships for patrol, they also got closer to the royal family. In addition, they also got an unexpected surprise. That is, after the country's massive revenge against the king for donating and building 2 cruise ships, it set off a wave of strong public attention to the Navy, and as the Navy Minister, Admiral Gorek the General will even take the opportunity to organize the Navy's own personnel to conduct publicity and fundraising operations across the country. These propagandists from the Navy not only brought promotional materials and ship models to promote the war, they even sent warships to cities near the sea for the public to visit and explain. When these people came to the clean deck and looked at the majestic naval officers and soldiers, their inner pride was fully satisfied. At this time, only a little hint was needed to make them donate enthusiastically. There are even many children who look at naval officers and soldiers with envy and have a dream of becoming a sailor when they grow up. It must be said that the Navy's publicity was very good. It not only raised a large amount of funds, about 13 million lire, but also obtained a large number of high quality soldiers. In the following 2 years, the Navy was so envious of the army that it couldn't be outdone and launched a wave of propaganda. However, due to the different arms, the publicity effect was not very good, as can be seen from the funds raised between the two. The army raised more than 4 million lire. Of course, this has a lot to do with the fact that army artillery is not as powerful as warships. After all, most people like more attractive equipment. How can artillery be compared with warships? Although Carlo's donation of warships caused a stir in Italy, it was not worth mentioning abroad. Many newspapers reported it as an interesting story on the 3rd and 4th pages. Even France, one of the countries involved, rarely put the report of Carlo's donation of warships on the front page of its domestic newspapers. It was basically reported on the first and second pages as a minor matter. From here we can see Italy's embarrassing position in Europe, and it can't get the respect it deserves despite jumping up and down. Small countries attach great importance to Italy, but no one in the big countries takes it seriously. Faced with such a situation, Desperatus, as Prime Minister, would certainly not ignore it. While he was busy rescuing the drought in the south, he also extended an olive branch to Britain and Germany, trying to find reliable friends among the two. The Prime Minister's office in Downing Street, London, has always been the centre of power of the British Empire, and the centre revolves around Prime Minister William Ewart Gladstone, who today received a guest from Italy, Your Excellency Jiminy Boccona. After serious discussions, we believe that our country currently has no intention to change its diplomatic relations with your country. With all due respect, an alliance with your country will not bring much benefit to the British Empire, but will cause trouble. It will be a lot more. Faced with the blunt words of British Prime Minister Gladstone, Boccona, the new Italian foreign minister, could only smile. Our country expresses regret that it cannot further develop diplomatic relations with your country. We in Italy have always expressed sincere feelings for your country. Although we have not been able to achieve further diplomatic relations with your country this time, Italy is deeply attached to your country. The feelings of the country have never changed. After finishing speaking, Boccona nodded and left. This visit to the UK was considered a failure. After Boccona left, Gladstone snorted, "These Italians are so self-righteous. The British Empire has only two allies, its navy and army. As long as the Royal Navy can dominate the world, no country can threaten the security of the British Empire. In this case, how is it possible? What about an alliance with the Italians? There are many people who want to form an alliance with the British Empire these days. If he really wanted to form an alliance, he would shout loudly, and diplomats from various countries would line up in the Thames River. Even Germany, which was prospering under the iron-blooded Prime Minister, had no possibility of forming an alliance with the British Empire. The German Prime Minister has always been very interested in forming an alliance with Britain, but the diplomatic strategy of staying outside the European continent has always been the reason for Britain's development and growth. So these Italians made the wrong calculation. The failure of the alliance with the United Kingdom did not discourage the Italian government. Originally, it did not have high expectations for an alliance with the United Kingdom. Based on the principle of hitting the target with two goals, it sent people to contact the British, so this result did not know surprises. It would be a surprise if the UK agreed. Prime Minister Desperatus' first reaction may be that it may be a fraud. What he really hopes for is an alliance with Germany. More than 10 years ago, Italy formed an alliance with Germany and jointly dealt with the Austrians. Although the relationship between Germany and Austria is now extraordinary, many friends believe that the Germans are not our mind. Your Excellency Beverly Garland, our country is still very interested in further developing diplomatic relations with your country. In the Chancellery in Berlin, the diplomatic envoy Count Beverly Garland was listening to Prime Minister Bismarck make the final decision on whether to form an alliance with Italy. Before this, the envoy Beverly Garland had been circulating in Berlin's political circles, trying to promote the alliance between the two countries. Of course, he was very busy during this period and did everything he could. Now he is waiting for the iron-blooded Prime Minister. It's time to make a decision. When he heard Prime Minister Bismarck express his interest in the German-Italian alliance, the envoy Beverly Garland showed an expression of joy, but what he said later made him know that he was happy too early. But the special envoy also knows that our country and Vienna have a special alliance, so to accept a new member, we need to consider the attitude of the ally. So I think that, if your country can persuade Vienna to agree, then forming an alliance will not be a problem. Bismarck's words made Beverly Garland feel like she couldn't keep her smile on. It was not that he had not sensed during his stay in Berlin that Germany's emphasis on Austria was much stronger than that of Italy, but no matter how strong it was not necessary to ask Vienna for its opinion even when deciding whether to accept an ally. Of course, Beverly Garland doesn't intend to give up just like that. Your Excellency Prime Minister, can't your country decide for itself whether it is willing to form an alliance with our country? Yes, our country must take Vienna's opinion into account in forming an alliance with your country. The Wily and scheming Bismarck responded to Beverly Garland's provocation and used this little trick in front of him. Isn't this a way of looking down on him? Does Vienna have to be considered in relations with our country? Yes, Vienna must be considered. Chapter 43, The Olive Branch That No One Wants to Accept, Part 2. If the failure of Foreign Secretary Gemini Boccona's visit to Britain was expected, then the failure of Count Beverly Garland's visit to Germany caught the Italian government somewhat off guard. You must know that Germany has considerable overlapping interests with Italy in some aspects, and it should be a natural candidate to become an ally. Moreover, Germany's investment in Italy has not been small at all in recent years. Funds from Germany currently account for 37.1% of Italy's foreign investment, surpassing Britain and France, and taking the first place point. Since the political and economic ties are so close, the relationship between the two countries should be further developed. But what is somewhat unexpected is that Germany is careless about wooing Italy, as they only care about economic interests, of course. As Prime Minister, Depretis also knows the reason, that is, there is Austria between the two countries. From a German perspective, Austria is much better than Italy. Even so, Depretis believes that Italy is not less important than Austria, and during this visit to Germany, he also gave Earl Beverly Garland a clue. If necessary, he can hint that as long as Germany is willing alliance with Italy, then Italy is willing to make some concessions on tariffs. This condition can be described as a huge concession for Italy to insist on. As we all know, the quality of German products is not very good at present. Apart from being cheap, they do not have any ability to compete with British and French products. Yes, Germany in this era is like the Chinese Empire in the 20th century. If Italy lowers its tariffs on Germany, it will further reduce the selling price of German products in Italy, expand its share of sales in Italy, and even harm local Italian companies. The reason why Depretis did this was not to find a reliable ally. After all considerations, the Germans were slightly more reliable. If nothing else, their world-famous army was worthy of trust. However, what people did not expect was that even if Italy gave up such huge benefits, Germany was still not tempted and still stood firmly on Austria's side. This made Depretis miscalculated. In fact, this is not a miscalculation. The main reason is that Italy is not as powerful as Austria. Austria has its own heavy industry. Although its Skoda heavy artillery is not as famous as Krupp, it is not much weaker. The people in the country still live a better life than more than half of the farmers in Italy. As for the army, although the Austro-Hungarian army is not known for its bravery and fighting skills, compared with the repeated defeats of the Italian army, it is like heaven and earth. As a practical consideration, why would the Germans choose a weak ally instead of a strong one? In addition, the Austrians all have historical origins. They are both Germanic and can communicate with each other in culture and language. How many Germans know about Italy's Latin language? Besides, Germany is not as strong as it was in the future and had no friends. There are still people who can be the Germans' opponents. Therefore, it is reasonable for Germany to choose the Austrians as allies. As for what the Germans said about resolving conflicts with Austria, this seems completely impossible to Depretis. First, we need to look at where the disputes between Italy and Austria lie. The current dispute between Italy and Austria is mainly in the Tyrol region, which is currently under Austro-Hungarian control, but Italy has never given up its claim to sovereignty over the region. Why do the two countries attach so much importance to Tyrol that they would not hesitate to fight? Tyrol is located in the eastern section of the Alps. Its territory is dominated by mountains in the north and plains in the south. In addition, the Inn and Drava river valleys within its territory are the main routes from Vienna to Italy. Today it is a battleground for military strategists. The area was annexed by the Habsburg family in 1363 and became the main route for their control of northern Italy. During the Italian Unification War, the Italian army tried to regain the Tyrol region many times, but failed due to various reasons, mainly because they never fought. So this has become the reason why Italy has never forgotten it after a unification. In addition, Italy's terrain is very suitable for defense. The Alps separate Italy from other countries, but only in Tyrol. Italy is indefinitionable. This is like the relationship between the Northern Song dynasty and the Yana and 16th prefecture of the Liao kingdom. Of course Italy would not accept it. Isn't this the point where the northern region, which has its own essence, is threatened by Vienna at any time? Therefore, the focus of Italian diplomacy in recent years has been on how to recapture the Tyrol region from the Austrians. Whether it was in 1878, when it joined forces with Russia and France, to try to start a war against Austria, or before that, Italy's eyes were always watching every move of the Austrians. Therefore, it is even harder to get Italy to recognize that Tyrol belongs to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. If Prime Minister Despotis dares to agree to this condition, the angry people will be enough to tear him apart. Therefore, if you want to resolve the conflict with Austria, unless a powerful mediator appears to forcefully suppress the conflict between the two countries. Currently, only Germans are qualified to be mediators, but Germany has no intention of getting involved. Since the Germans have no intention of interfering, the negotiations for an alliance between Italy and Germany have reached a deadlock. Even he, the Prime Minister, has no good way to face such a deadlock. However, under the current circumstances, Austria can also send someone to test it out. Thinking of this, Despotis called someone, sent a telegram to Count Beverly Garland, and asked him to go to Vienna and try Austria's attitude. Following Despotis's order, Count Garland, who was originally planning to return directly to his country, was preparing to get off the bus in Vienna. I hope his visit to Austria will be fruitful. Chapter 44 Future Outlook. Count Garland's visit to Austria was destined to be in vain. The Austrians were not enthusiastic about the visit from Italy, and were even very cold. Austria only signed an alliance treaty with Germany 2 years ago. After removing the threat from the north, the Austrians had the confidence to face the threat from Italy, although they were in competition with Russia on the Balkan issue. Under the mediation of Prime Minister Bismarck, relations between the two countries have not fallen out. It is not the time for Russia to form an alliance with France. He is still full of expectations for Germany's friendship, and is trying to maintain the Three Emperors alliance system through Germany as a mediator. That's right. Before the Three Emperors system collapsed, the conflict between Russia and Austria-Hungary did not expand. Therefore, when Austria-Hungary was not burdened with enemies, the olive branch extended by Italy was not very attractive to Vienna, so this was destined to be fruitless in the visit to Austria. After a round of selling, the Italian government finally discovered that it would be difficult to find strong allies without diplomatic changes in Europe. This made the Italian government very embarrassed and worried. So, Prime Minister Despotis' diplomatic efforts failed this time. Yes, Your Majesty. The government is currently discussing countermeasures to deal with possible situations against Italy in the future. After hearing what the captain of the guard said, Carlo stood up, looked at the scenery outside the window, and said, "Don't worry about the government. The crisis in Tunisia has frightened them to the point of paranoia." When faced with Carlo's complaints about the government, Baron Felicius, the captain of the bodyguard, lowered his head and pretended not to hear. Although the captain of the guard pretended not to hear, the words continued to fall in his ears. Everyone knows that rushing is not a business, and only trying to remedy the situation after a mistake has been made. These officials are really bad. In Carlo's view, the government should now focus more on developing domestic affairs. Although Italy's natural conditions are not good and resources are insufficient, industrialization cannot be left behind. The first part is not the important point. The important point is that the last sentence is what Carlo wants to say. In Carlo's view, Italy should not reach out if it is not strong enough in Europe. It is best to target other regions. For example, the Ottoman Empire, which is in decline, is a good choice. I didn't realize that Russia also started to bully the Ottomans and gradually gained confidence before it could compete with other countries in Europe. Italy can definitely learn from Ottoman's example and regain its confidence. This is not because Carlo has taken a fancy to the current Libya. Apart from the desert and the herdsmen, the current Libya is of no use to Italy. It is unwise to invest precious funds in the current Libya. Although there is oil in Libya, the distance it is buried cannot be mined with current technology. Therefore, taking Libya now is of no use, except eating sand. Carlo targeted Ottoman territories in Europe. At present, the Ottoman territory in Europe is quite large. Macedonia, Albania, Thrace, Epirus, etc. are all its territories. In addition, many islands such as Crete in the Mediterranean are under the jurisdiction of the Ottomans. Such a vast territory is enough for Italy to claim part of it. Carlo's goal is very clear. He is not willing to go too deep into the Balkan Peninsula and arouse the hostility of Russia and Austria-Hungary. He only needs to get Albania, including Kosovo. This would allow Italy to put an L in the Balkans, while also gaining access to the Adriatic point. Although the Austro-Hungarian navy is currently not strong, for Carlo, ensuring Italy's advantage in the Mediterranean is an inevitable choice in the future. Of course, all of this requires Italy to have strength. With Italy's current strength, it is still unknown who will lose and who will win in a war with the Ottoman Empire. However, Carlo estimated that in all likelihood it was going to be a bad fight. The Ottomans had the advantage on land, while Italy had the advantage on the sea. In this case, he would naturally not show interest in Osman now, but would hide it and not expose it at all. This thought can only be his future outlook, but no one can say it now. Now for Carlo, strengthening Italy's strength is the key. At present, he divides this hope into two parts. One is the Electrical Research Center in Mirino, and the other is the two Venice-class armored cruisers that are under construction. But it sounds a bit annoying. I wonder if he has changed Tesla's trajectory. The AC power he has been looking forward to has not yet come to fruition. There are other small inventions, such as more accurate electricity meters, electric drills, hair dryers, etc. Although these inventions are good, they can only be regarded as daily necessities. He cannot make Italy rich with these gadgets like the novels he read in his previous life. First of all, there is a question. How many people can afford this thing? You must know that these gadgets all need to be driven by electricity. Although electricity in Europe is developing well at present, the only lights that can enter the home are lighting lamps. One more thing, in this era, electric lights were basically installed in wealthy homes and factories. If it is installed in a factory, it is because it needs to earn profits for capital. But if it is installed in a wealthy family, the price of the light is not low, and the electricity bill is not cheap at all. There is currently a lack of efficient high power generators, which prevents the price of electricity from being lowered. So Carlo asked Tesla to prioritize research in this area in an attempt to reduce the cost of power generation and allow electricity to be used on a larger scale. Of course, this is also Carlo's desire to make his own small contribution to promoting social development. Of course, allowing Italy to board the electrification express is a small requirement in his contribution. But now Tesla's research on high power motors has not yielded results, which makes Carlo a little anxious. If he hadn't learned electricity in his previous life, Carlo would have wanted to go into battle on his own. As for asking what Carlo learned in his previous life, you feel a bit ashamed. Less than 3 years after leaving school, all the knowledge he learned was given back to the teacher, except that he became increasingly slippery at playing the keyboard. I'm really ashamed of the title of time traveler. While Carlo was anxious about Tesla's lack of research results, the person he was obsessed with was conducting a new round of experiments at the Electrical Research Center, preparing for experiment 92. Tesla, whose hair was as messy as a bird's nest, was wearing a smelly shirt and a pair of panda eyes, and was giving orders to many of his assistants, and his eyes were staring at a motor without a casing, ready for experiments. This motor looks like it is handmade, and there are hammer marks on it. But this is not important at all to Tesla. He has been unable to develop the results he wanted, and his inner anxiety is almost written on his face. This time is his new experiment. I hope it will succeed. Chapter 45 Success. On a new day, the city of Rome still exudes its endless charm as always. Carlo also woke up to the first ray of sunshine in the morning. He was a little busy yesterday and slept a little late. But as soon as he woke up, Carlo felt something was wrong. There was a small bump on the quilt. Oh, I have to take a cold shower again. After Carlo sighed, he got out of bed and rushed to take a shower. After a while, the maid came in and thought he was playing hooligan again. After a period of calm operation, the abnormal state finally subsided. If this continues, sooner or later I won't be able to bear it anymore. Carlo, who came out wrapped in a bath towel, always felt that this state was wrong. He thought that His Majesty, the King, did not even have a maid to serve him in bed. This was too unscientific. or choose a time to turn Naya into a bedchamber maid. As far as Naya's looks, breasts, and ass are concerned, she looks good after 30 years. Carlo, who was thinking about good things, suddenly felt an inexplicable pressure coming into his heart. He felt that something would happen to him if he continued to think like this. In an instant, Carlo withdrew his thoughts, and his heart was as holy as a Buddha point. But soon he could no longer maintain this mentality. Good morning, Your Majesty. The young and beautiful Naya appeared in front of him like a jumping elf. Why are you so happy today? The Buddha-like mentality collapsed after Naya appeared, and Carlo felt restless again. Maggie asked me to go to the circus with her today. What's so good about the circus? The straight man's answer made the little maid frown secretly. Sure enough, straight men are straight wherever they go. But Carlo, who didn't know it, felt that the angry Naya was more beautiful, no matter how he looked at it. I will ignore you, Your Majesty. Facing Naya, who looked like she was coming to comfort me, Carlo failed to do what he wanted. Okay, Naya, I'm leaving first. With a bang, the door was closed, and the maid was the only one left in the room. Asshole. The little maid was so angry that Carlo ran away after being teased that she couldn't help but cursed. Fortunately, Carlo wasn't here, otherwise he would have shouted that Naya is so cute, even when she's angry. After flirting with the maid, Carlo went downstairs to have breakfast with his mother and younger siblings. After a brief confrontation, Carlo, who had not yet thought about what he planned to do today, saw the captain of the guard walking up to him with a smile on his face. What's the matter, Captain of the Guard? Your Majesty, Marino just called and they succeeded. This is the specific information. Carlo grabbed the information and read it at a glance. Hahaha, God is really helping me. Carlo, who laughs unbridledly, does not fit the image of a king now. But now he didn't care about his image at all and immediately ordered, get the car ready now, let's go to Marino. Following Carlo's order and under the protection of his guards, Carlo got into the carriage and galloped towards Marino. Thanks for your hard work. Carlo, who had just gotten out of the car, quickly walked towards Tesla and Director Argus, who greeted him and was the first to thank them for their efforts. It's all Tesla's fault. Although Director Argus spoke first, he attributed the credit to the Serbian scientist. And after saying that, he gave up his position very discerningly. It's nothing. It took such a long time and such a large amount of money to make it. I feel a little ashamed, and like others, Tesla has some opinions of its own. Don't put everything on your shoulders. I'm very satisfied that it was developed in such a short time. Faced with Tesla's dissatisfaction with himself, Carlo quickly spoke to persuade him. This is currently the only electrification scientist in Italy who can take action, and he has no intention of letting go. Okay, take me to see this high power motor. Seeing that Tesla was in better spirits, Carlo quickly changed the topic to the target who came today. Your Majesty, please come this way. Led by Tesla and Argus, Carlo planned to visit the results of the research and development. Is this a high power motor? Carlo looked at the huge motor in front of him and asked in surprise. Because this thing is too big, with a height of more than 2 meters and a length of more than 4 meters. And the copper wire wrapped on it is visible to the naked eye. As if he knew Carlo would ask this, Tesla began to explain the performance of this high power motor. Yes, Your Majesty, this is a newly developed high power motor with a power of up to 514.7 kilowatts. It is the most powerful motor currently known. Facing Tesla's explanation, Carlo looked at this big thing in trance. How practical is it? Carlo was the first to think of the practicality of this thing. Facing Carlo's inquiry, Tesla spoke with a somewhat unnatural expression. We haven't tested the practicality yet, but it has been running for 8 hours before, and the performance has always been stable. However, it will take time to test and improve if it is to be fully practical. Yes, in Tesla's view, it is a bit early to put it into practical use. It needs to be run for at least a while to see if there are any shortcomings. After Carlo said the words, he also knew that he was a little impatient. But when he thought about the opportunity for overtaking in corners in Italy, he really couldn't hold back. In that case, let's test it as soon as possible. Next, the tour was a bit boring. because this thing is not yet practical. So Carlo took a look at other research projects in the research center. After walking out of the experimental building, Carlo pulled Tesla and spoke. At present, the research and development of high-power motors has come to an end. I don't think we need you much for practical research, right? Although Tesla didn't know what Carlo wanted to say next. She already had some guesses. Yes, Your Majesty. I can leave the practical research to my deputy Anthony. I just need to supervise it. In this case, I want you to study the long-distance transmission of alternating current. That's right. Carlo already has plans for the next development of alternating current. In the past, Tesla was asked to develop high-power motors, but it was actually a bit of a rush. Tesla has historically made more achievements in alternating current systems and electromagnetic research. Of course, it is indeed remarkable that he developed thousands of inventions in his life, but then he became obsessed with wireless power transmission, which turned out to be a complete sinkhole point. But now Carlo is not going to give him time to think about these sinkholes. Therefore, we must constantly give him tasks and keep him busy in the laboratory point. Of course, he is not a stingy person, and he also wants to give sweet dates. I plan to build large-scale hydropower stations in Italy after the long-range AX system is successfully developed, so your new research topic is very important. Although Carlo did not say it explicitly, Tesla's spirit was already excited, and he was already enjoying the future, the results of his own research, and the blueprint for large-scale application in Italy and Europe. I'm late. I'm a little busy at work today, so I'll post a chapter first, so you can read it first. One more thing, this book was recommended on the weekend, and the steamed buns were ordered in advance. I would like to thank all the book friends in advance for the recommendation tickets in your hands. Chapter 46, 3 Emperors Realliance, Part 1. Carlo, who had just returned to Rome from Myrino, received news of the visit of Prime Minister Despertis before he had time to rest. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, please. Although Carlo didn't know what was going on with the Prime Minister's visit, he still believed that there must be some reason why the Prime Minister came to see him despite his busy schedule. Sure enough, as soon as Prime Minister Despertis saw Carlo, he immediately said a shocking news with worry. Your Majesty, do you know about the Three Emperors Alliance? Certainly. How could Carlo not know about the Alliance of Three Emperors, a diplomatic alliance that affects Europe? In September 1872, Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I and Prime Minister Count Andras Gilla, Russian Emperor Alexander II and Prime Minister A.M. Gorchakov visited Berlin and met with Kaiser Wilhelm I and Prime Minister Bismarck. The alliance signed at the meeting is so famous. This alliance was initially decided by the three countries to maintain the status quo in Europe and coordinate to resolve disputes in Southeast Europe, mainly the disputes between Austria and Russia in the Balkans. The treaty stipulated a period of 5 years, but after expiration, there was no further news. Could it be that he is out of shape again? Carlo was right. Something was indeed wrong again. I saw His Excellency the Prime Minister continue to speak. We heard news that the three countries may have signed another alliance treaty. This news surprised Carlo. Although the Three Emperors Alliance was indeed later renewed in history, Carlo did not know the signing time. How could it be so unlucky to sign it at this time? Yes, the signing of the Alliance of Three Emperors had a great impact on Italy. First of all, Austria had relieved, or temporarily relieved, its conflict with Russia, and could concentrate its energy in one direction. Although the Austrians are currently focusing on the Balkans, this still has a great impact on Italy. Not good news. Because Italy wants to get involved, the difficulty becomes even greater. Of course, this news has a negative and positive side for Italy. First of all, the French will no longer focus on Italy, because any normal person knows that the Three Emperors Alliance is very detrimental to France, and the alliance of the three major powers in Central and Eastern Europe is also frightening. Although I don't know if the content of the alliance is aimed at France, the feeling of being isolated is very bad. Thinking of this, Carlo had an idea. So what does the Prime Minister mean? Although Carlo only said half of what he said, who Depretis was, he immediately guessed his thoughts. This won't work. If it is discovered that it was our country that disclosed it, then relations with the three countries will be very difficult. In Fact, Depretis mainly wants to talk about Germany, because this alliance is most beneficial to Germany. Italy has always wanted to form an alliance with Germany, but the Germans did not pay attention to Italy, which turned Italy's idea into an unrequited love point. As for the other two countries, it is well known that Italy and Austria do not deal with each other. As for Russia, the two countries are too far apart and have little contact, so if they offend them, they will be offended. Could he still cross Austria and attack Italy? Even if it does come, Britain and France will be the first to jump in. You must know that, in order to prevent it from entering the Mediterranean, Britain and France did not hesitate to fight with it. They have already arrived in Italy. If you don't do it, what are you waiting for? So Italy doesn't need to pay too much attention to Russia. In order to prevent Carlo from continuing to think wildly, Prime Minister Depretis directly stated his purpose. Your Majesty, the main reason I came here this time is to ask Your Majesty to pay a visit to Berlin. Yes, this is what Depretis came for. After Carlo heard the Prime Minister's words, he asked a more general question. Visiting Berlin? That's right, Your Majesty. Why visit Berlin? The Prime Minister's words made Carlo have a question mark on his face. Seeing the somewhat confused king, Depretis opened his mouth to explain. There is no need to rush this visit to Berlin. In terms of time, I plan to go again next year. Carlo quite understood what Depretis said. In later generations, national leaders basically made preparations for foreign state visits 3 months or 6 months in advance, and this was when transportation was convenient. In this era, decisions about foreign visits in the second half of the year are basically made for more than half a year. That's why Carlo, who has never visited foreign countries, is not familiar with this. Even so, Carlo still couldn't figure out the purpose of his visit to Germany. Since you don't understand, you have to ask patiently, so he asked directly. Prime Minister, why did you suddenly decide to visit Germany? Suddenly, looking at the young king who looked curious for knowledge, Depretis decided to give some tips. Your Majesty, your visit to Germany has a great connection with the possible Three Emperors alliance. As for the connection, Your Majesty needs to understand it himself. The Prime Minister's words made Carlo think deeply. What is the relationship between the two? Looking at the young king who was lost in thought, Depretis quietly exited the room. Just as he came, not taking away a single cloud point. So in a huge room, Carlo was the only one thinking quietly. The hands of the clock rotated in circles, and the light began to dim. The boy who was sitting still like a wooden sculpture suddenly moved. Ha ha ha, I thought of it. Unbridled laughter resounded in the room, and the boy was filled with joy, as if he had found some treasure. Hey, I actually sat there for so long. Only then did Carlo notice the change in the sky, and then he said to himself, I didn't expect that visiting Germany could be used in this way. That's right. Carlo had already guessed about Depretis' proposed visit to Germany. If the guess is correct, the newspapers will then report extensively on his and the Prime Minister's upcoming visit to Germany. It will attract the attention of France. If France knows about the news of the alliance between the three emperors, it will definitely find ways to improve the relationship between the two countries. Of course, if you don't know, then Italy is not at a loss, and it is not bad to close relations with Germany. Of course, no matter what, the French will pay close attention to this. However, according to his understanding, the relationship between the French and Russia is pretty good. So it is possible to learn something from it. It would be wonderful if this was the case. France would definitely win over Russia and try to change its diplomatic disadvantage. Of course, for Italy, this is not a loss at all. If Russia and France are in conflict with each other, then Italy will also have the opportunity to join the Three Emperors alliance. Carlo's analysis was based on a combination of past life memories and current intelligence. Although he didn't know when the Three Emperors alliance was disbanded, it must not be too far away. Moreover, with the dispute between Russia and the Austrians in the Balkans, Germany cannot suppress it for long. Carlo couldn't help but get excited when he thought that Italy had the opportunity to fish in troubled waters. Of course, this requires waiting patiently, and Carlo plans to tease the little maid to vent his joy. Chapter 47 Three Emperors Realliance, Part 2. Things turned out as Carlo expected. Within a few days, news appeared in the newspapers that Carlo and the Prime Minister planned to visit Berlin. You don't need to guess to know that this is an act authorized by the government. Faced with the visit of the Italian King and Prime Minister, it is certainly impossible for Germany to refuse. So soon, the topic between Germany and Italy spread. Many people want to know whether Italy's visit to Germany is a routine visit or what purpose it has. Among these people, the French are the most enthusiastic. Damn it, are these Italians restless? In the Prime Minister's office, Prime Minister Rufferi, who had long been out of spirits, was furious in the office. Judging from his expression, Rufferi was furious. Your Excellency, Prime Minister, the current problems in Italy are just a small problem. The bigger worries are those three countries in the east. In the room, Foreign Minister Gambetta voiced his concerns. Yes, the news of the realliance of the three emperors was also not hidden from the French. However, because they did not know the specific content, the French government was more speculating and testing. France has many friends in Russia, and the French ambassador to Russia is currently trying his best to learn about any news about the three emperors' renewed alliance. However, due to the short time and the high level of confidentiality, the French ambassador has not yet gained anything. Prime Minister Rufferi thought for a while and said, maybe we should show some goodwill to the Italians. So, how do we show kindness? Foreign Minister Gambetta is curious what the Prime Minister plans to do. We can leave Italian industry alone in Tunisia for a while and see how the Italians react. It's a good idea. It's unobtrusive and allows Italians to feel the change in our attitude. Gambetta sincerely praised this method. However, the foreign minister's praise did not change Prime Minister Rufferi's expression. I'm not worried about the Italians. It's mainly the alliance formed by Germany, Austria, and Russia that deserves our attention. Although there is currently no evidence that the three countries signed an alliance treaty, Rufferi's intuition told him that 9 out of 10 of them were true. Therefore, France cannot sit idly by and allow a diplomatic situation in Europe that is unfavorable to France, and Jaffelli needs to choose where to start to dismantle the relationship between the three. In fact, there is no need to consider this. Russia is the only choice. Wanting Russia, Raffaelli was a little annoyed by his predecessor's behavior. The reason is that in 1878, after the Berlin Conference, Italy, Russia, and France formed a secret treaty to prepare for war against the Austrians. Among them, Russia is because of the Balkans, and Italy is because of the disputed Tyrol region. France, in addition to wooing the two countries, also has the idea of cutting Germany's wings. Diplomatic relations changed very quickly during this period, and 3 years later the conspirators turned against each other. Both Russia and Italy secretly assembled their armies and made preparations for war. However, the French government regretted it at this time. The French pressed the pause button at the last minute because the Austrians did not sign terms with Germany to deal with France. The Austrians, who escaped the disaster, immediately signed a treaty of comprehensive alliance with Germany a year later. Seeing the comprehensive alliance between Germany and Austria, Russia, which was a little worried about its western border, immediately put down its dignity and wanted to join it. Everyone knows what happened next. France robbed Italy of Tunisia, which completely deteriorated the relationship between the two countries. I don't know if Prime Minister Rufferi now regrets his move to completely push Italy away. As for the relationship between France and Germany, almost all politicians agree that it is impossible for them to live in peace because of the Lorraine and Alsace issues. Although there is no outbreak yet, a series of conflicts between France and Germany will inevitably break out in the future. This is the common view of France's knowledgeable people, and it is also the will of the middle and lower classes. No one dares to violate this principle. France and Habsburg's Austro-Hungarian Empire are currently drifting apart. Although diplomatic relations have not deteriorated yet, they are France's potential enemies by virtue of the German-Austrian Comprehensive Alliance Treaty. Therefore, the only choice among the three countries is Russia. Although Britain and France cut off Russia's attempt to reach the Mediterranean in the Crimean War, as the saying goes, there are no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. The interests of Germany and France cannot be reconciled, but the interests of France and Russia can be reconciled. Everyone knows the Russian ambitions in the Balkans. As long as Russia is not willing to extend its claws to the Balkans, France can secretly push it behind the scenes. Then let's see how Prime Minister Bismarck can calm the collision between the two powerful countries in the Balkans. To achieve such a goal, France must have sufficient investment. It just so happens that the Russians are used to being poor, and France has enough funds. This may be a way out. Ruffili, who was constantly sketching in his mind, spoke after a moment of silence. Instruct our ambassador to Russia to increase communication with the Russian upper-level personnel. In addition, Mr. Gambetta, would you like to communicate with Russia and arrange for our visit to Russia? Although Prime Minister Ruffili did not say it clearly, Gambetta is also a veteran in diplomacy and immediately understood the Prime Minister's thoughts. Gambetta replied immediately, "That's no problem. I believe St. Petersburg will welcome our visit." As Italy prepares to visit Germany, France is also making intensive preparations for its visit to Russia. As the visited Russia, of course it was willing to see the French government visit, and it agreed to France's request without hesitation. France and Italy are both using their own methods to try to disintegrate the Three Emperors alliance. Although it is impossible now, as the saying goes, a virtuous girl is afraid of pestering her husband. Besides, these three countries have their own little calculations, and the desire for women is pretty much the same. Either can play the side drum first, and when the time is right in the future, the alliance of the three will collapse in one fell swoop. Sometimes I have to say that politics is a wonderful thing. It allows two countries that have fallen out to achieve a series of cooperation intentionally or unintentionally because of the common goal. Of course, preparations for the respective visits of the two countries are still in full swing, and they are currently busy with their own affairs. However, France's slowdown in Tunisia against Italian industries was immediately felt by the Italian government. In response, the Italian government also reduced its anti-French rhetoric. Just like this, the hostility between the two countries, caused by Tunisia, is slowly diminishing. However, although the official behavior of the two countries has reduced their hostility, the people are still noisy. Among them, Garibaldi, a national hero, also promoted anti-French rhetoric in major cities. Therefore, if the two countries want to reconcile as before, they will not have a decade or two, or it will be impossible for one party to give up enough benefits, while the government and the people are each doing their own actions. What is Our Majesty Carlo doing? He is currently inspecting the former Red Shirt Army. Now the 3rd Guards Regiment, which is undergoing training. Chapter 48 Haldane Cossents, please collect and recommend. Camp Ciampino is bustling with shouts and shouts these days. The officers and soldiers of the 3rd Guards Regiment, who were reorganized from the former Red Shirt Army, are undergoing rigorous training here. Many of the contents made the officers and soldiers of the 4th Regiment of the Army's 9th Division originally stationed here feel chills. For example, they marched for 20 kilometers with 20 kilograms of guns, ammunition, water bottles and other equipment on their backs. Every time they came down, they were as tired as a dog. The group of people in the military camp carried 35 kilograms of equipment and traveled 35 kilometers. Of course, these people didn't feel refreshed after running away. They were just as tired as dogs, and every day these people wake up in the morning until they turn off the lights at night. They have everything arranged so that they don't have even a moment to themselves. It's as if they are being trained into robots, but these people have great perseverance, and no one quits because they can't stand it. Start. Running practice now. Target 40 laps. Everyone turn right. Get ready. Start. Under the order of the training officer, the officers and soldiers of the 3rd Guards Regiment wearing khaki military uniforms immediately began to run forward under the order. The uniform movements and the masculinity of the officers and soldiers brought a strong sense of solemnity. In a place where the training officers and soldiers could not see, Carlo, as the king, was watching the training of the officers and soldiers of the 3rd Guards Regiment, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Tervapulev, the commander of the 3rd Guards Regiment. Lieutenant Colonel Pulev was Carlo's handpicked commander. He graduated from Turin Artillery Engineering School and served successively as Artillery Platoon Commander, Artillery Company Commander, Deputy Battalion Commander, and Battalion Commander. He also participated in the Second and Third Wars of Independence, and performed well in all of them. After the unification of Italy, in view of Lieutenant Colonel Pilev's performance, he was transferred to the Guards as infantry battalion commander and deputy regimental commander. Later, when the 3rd Guards Regiment was formed, he was favored by Carlo to become the first commander of the newly formed 3rd Regiment. The reason why Carlo took a fancy to him is simple. Lieutenant Colonel Pilev is a pure soldier with all the virtues of a soldier. Moreover, he never makes political speeches or contacts any political groups. He just ponders military theories when he has nothing to do. Behaviors such as practicing military plans were deeply recognized by Carlo. As a soldier, you should be pure. How well trained are these officers and soldiers? Carlo looked at the officers and soldiers who were sweating from training and asked Pilev, "Your Majesty, the training is not bad." In more than a month of training, the compliance rate was 87.1%. Although he didn't know what Pilev's compliance rate was, Carlo didn't intend to continue asking. Instead, he asked other questions of concern. How many people are left in this group now? Although Carlo's question was a bit unclear, how could Lieutenant Colonel Pilev not know what Carlo meant? "Your Majesty, there are currently 1,309 people remaining in the military camp for training." Lieutenant Colonel Pilev's words made Carlo look a little unhappy. "I remember there were 1,513 people at the beginning, right?" Although Carlo used a question, the affirmation in his words was unmistakable. "Yes, Your Majesty." Faced with Carlo's inquiry, how could Lieutenant Colonel Pilev, the leader of the 3rd Regiment, not know the reason? I saw him opening his mouth to explain. "Your Majesty, there were indeed 1,513 people who arrived in Rome at the beginning, but during the subsequent endurance training, only 1,417 people met the standards of the Guards. In addition, during more than a month of training, many people withdrew due to injuries, violated military regulations, and quit on their own accord, etc. Reason: there are 108 people." Pilev's words made Carlo calm down. Of course, he didn't dare to believe Pilev's explanation alone. He had to wait for the report from his arranger to find out. When Pilev saw that His Majesty in front of him didn't say anything, he felt relieved. This is not to say that Pilev was hiding something, but that an accident occurred at that time, which greatly reduced the number of people. Everyone knows that training for new recruits is hard, but this training was particularly hard because of the intervention of the army. Since it's too hard, there will be resentment, and most people's way of dealing with resentment in the military camp is to self-regulate. If they can't regulate it, they will naturally want to give up, especially if they are allowed to withdraw. But this is just what most people think, and some people are resentful and unwilling to quit like this, but instead want to come back with revenge. There happened to be several such resentful soldiers in the 3rd Regiment. On a dark and stormy night, several soldiers entered the room of Caesar, the chief training instructor. Everyone knew what happened next. Several soldiers with bruises and swollen faces were tied to a high platform for public display. If Caesar can be dealt with so easily, how can he deserve the title of Hell Instructor? As for these unlucky guys, they were also kicked out of the military camp after being shown in public. This naturally broke Carlo's agreement with the military. No one had anything to say about this. If you attack a superior in the army, getting kicked out is considered a light thing. Especially in the 19th century, volleyball killings were only a little over 2 decades old. Don't emphasize discipline and the dignity of officers during this period. Offending an officer is not a small crime at all. But for Pilev, there was no need to inform the king about this matter. After all, it would make everyone look bad. Moreover, he not only knew the reason for the birth of his 3rd Regiment, but also knew the game between His Majesty and the military. Of course, a lot of information was not accessible to him at his level. It was General Grove who informed him. General Grove is responsible for commanding the entire Guards. Although the Guards has only 3 regiments with nearly 10,000 troops so far, General Grove's status in the army is even higher than that of ordinary military commanders. After all, as a close minister of the king, it is inevitable to occupy a sufficient position. After listening to Lieutenant Colonel Pilev's report, Carlo continued to observe the training of officers and soldiers. However, the training of officers and soldiers was indeed a bit boring, and Carlo, who was very interested, couldn't help but yawn. After watching it for a long time. The sharp-eyed Lieutenant Colonel Pilev immediately suggested, after seeing the king's impatience, "Your Majesty, how about we go see the shooting training?" "Okay. Then, let's lead the way." So, under the leadership of Pilev, a group of people came to the shooting range and watched the shooting training. 35 points. The soldier reporting the target loudly announced the score, causing cheers to erupt from the scene. This score is not low. It can score 35 points with 4 bullets at a distance of 200 meters. It is definitely the qualification of a sharpshooter. "Haldane, your shooting is surprisingly stable." Ada Berry stepped forward and patted Cosenz on the shoulder, praising her friend. But as the shooter himself, Haldane Cosenz was a little dissatisfied with this. "I was careless. The third bullet didn't take into account the wind and missed the target. Otherwise, it definitely shouldn't have landed on the 8-point ring," Berry said in surprise after hearing his friend's complaint. "Forget it, Haldane. You are not satisfied with this. Let others do what you want." Facing his friend's words, little Cosenz lowered his head and wiped his gun. What he is holding is the Italian standard rifle Vitry M1870. This gun has a smooth body, a rounded handguard, a plump butt, smooth and bright lines, and a hint of Florence's artistic flavor in its playfulness. The bullet used with the Vitry rifle is 10.4x47R, a slightly weaker, but still satisfactory black powder bullet. Much better looking than Hahn's 11mm Mauser and Fuleo's 577/.450. However, the operation of this gun is a bit different. The Vitry rifle is equipped with a 4-round clip. At first glance, it looks like the 11mm Marescialiki clip. The rifle magazines of the same period all had 5-round magazines, but this one was short of the mark. This is still a little weird. There is a small rope on the clip. When the magazine is pressed into the gun, the shooter pulls the cord to pull the magazine out. That's not all. As a swing bolt rifle, its locking tenon is on a separately rotating sleeve behind the bolt, and the bolt body does not rotate. Well, this Italian standard rifle is not highly rated among the military. However, because the propellant is in the wave of replacing black powder with smokeless powder, the Italian army can only use this gun at present. Of course, the research and development of new guns has already been discussed in the army. I believe that Italy will have a new standard rifle within 10 years, but these are not important to little Cosenz, because his performance just now was seen. "Cosenz, come here." Cosenz, who was called by name, looked up and saw his training instructor calling him, and beside him stood Commander Pilev and other officers. The strange thing is that they are all surrounding a 15 or 16-year-old boy. But for Cosenz, he didn't pay much attention to it and ran over immediately. "Sergeant." Cosenz, reporting, arriving in front of this group of people. Cosenz immediately saluted and reported loudly. The biggest impression he had after living in the military camp for more than a month was that he needed to report wherever he went. After the instructor returned the greeting, the boy asked, "Your name is Cosenz?" "Yes, Your Excellency. My name is Haldane Cosenz from Palermo." Cosenz's answer satisfied the young man. "Nice to meet you, Sergeant Cosenz. Your marksmanship is impressive." Although he didn't understand why the young man said this, Cosenz wisely did not make any inappropriate remarks when he saw the officers surrounding him. "Thank you for your praise. This is all the result of the instructor's training." After Cosenz finished speaking, he could clearly feel the instructor's joy. Although his expression remained unchanged, he could still feel the praise in his eyes. "Sergeant Cosenz, please go back." "Yes." "How did Haldane Cosenz come and go?" Carlo withdrew his gaze and said something to Lieutenant Colonel Pilev beside him. "The training effect is very good, Your Majesty." "You're welcome." Carlo then continued to observe several other trainings of the third group, and they were all pretty good. It can be seen that hard work has been put into training, and the soldiers are also working hard. Satisfied, Carlo left as the officers of the 3rd Regiment saw him off. On the carriage, Carlo thought of the young man he saw today and couldn't help but talk to himself. Haldane Cosenz, also from Palermo. There was a smile on his face. It's too late to code, so I'm trying to get one more chapter Today I'm recommending. Please vote for recommendations and favorites. Thank you all. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49 St. Petersburg Storm. Please collect and recommend. The autumn wind blows through St. Petersburg, leaving a chill in the sky. But this is nothing to the residents of St. Petersburg. At least St. Petersburg is much better than desolate Siberia. It's miserable for those who were sent to Siberia to grow potatoes over the years in the past. Every few years, prominent nobles in the city would be sent to Siberia by the Tsar, and each time they would cry and cry along the way, which was very sad. The grievances in St. Petersburg have nothing to do with French Ambassador Miguel de Rivera, who is rushing to meet with Russian Foreign Minister Gorchakov. But this time he did not ride in the carriage with the eye-catching diplomatic logo, but in a very ordinary carriage. He had not forgotten that there were even more Germans in St. Petersburg than they were. The carriage zigzagged and came to a house without any sign. Your Excellency, we have arrived. Simon, the coachman and bodyguard, reminded him. Okay, I know. After replying, Rivera took his briefcase, opened the car door, and walked out. There was someone at the door. Although he was wearing ordinary clothes, judging from the bulge in his waist, he was carrying a weapon and was watching his surroundings vigilantly. But after seeing Rivera coming, he opened the door and let him in. Your Excellency, please come this way. After entering, Rivera was led to a room by a waiter, dressed as a servant. Hello, Mr. Rivera. The person who greeted him was none other than Russian Foreign Minister Gorchakov. Sir, it feels like we are meeting in secret, which is very bad. Once inside, de Rivera, who is the French ambassador, complained. Faced with Rivera's complaint, Gorchakov, the Russian Foreign Minister, spoke apologetically. I'm sorry, because for well-known reasons, our country does not want this contact to be known to irrelevant people. Although Gorchakov was apologetic, Rivera, who had stayed in St. Petersburg for a long time, knew that this Russian colleague was not easy to deal with at all. Do you know what you think? Our discussion this time is not something shameful. After complaining, Rivera immediately got down to business. Do you know the amount and interest of this loan? It is known. So, what is your country prepared to put as collateral? Our country intends to use livestock taxes as collateral. Rivera, who had learned about the Russian tax raids before coming, replied after thinking about it. In this case, the bank should be satisfied. Yes, the two were discussing a loan. The loan amount was not small, reaching a loan limit of 400 million francs. The loan was actually quite dramatic. Russia originally planned to raise funds by issuing bonds. It's just that I don't know where the French got the news. Several people from the Paris financial community approached the Russian Ministry of Finance and said that there was a way to help them find low interest loans without issuing bonds. As we all know, bond interest rates are lower than borrowings, and they are still low interest borrowings, which makes the Ministry of Finance very happy. After some contact, the person hiding behind it was revealed to be the French government. But for Russia, it doesn't matter that the French are behind this loan. To put it more directly, Russia is still happy to see results. Although Russia fought France in the Crimean War and even lost a Tsar, but this was all 20 years ago. As the saying goes, time dilutes everything. But the current flirting behavior between the Russians and the French was a secret. Of course, in view of the relationship between the three emperors alliance, it was done more covertly. But some things can be said and done, and some things can be done, but cannot be said. It is obvious that the behavior of Russia and France is that what they can do cannot be said, so the contact between the two is very hidden. Of course, for Russia, although it is allied with Germany and Austria, its economic ties with Germany and Austria are not close. As we all know, exports to Europe are mainly based on raw materials, minerals and agriculture. Germany and Austria generally import mineral raw materials from Russia and export precision machine lathes and other industrial products. There is obviously a huge difference in the import and export classifications between the two. Russia exports low value added products and imports high value machinery. Although German products have lower prices in Europe, they occupy a large share of the Russian market, which also leads to a very large trade gap between Russia and Germany. Faced with such a situation, the Russian government certainly does not want to see it. In addition, in order to protect Juncker's interests, Germany imposed higher tariffs on agricultural products, which further aggravated Russia's dissatisfaction point. Although it is now allied with Germany and Austria for profit, many knowledgeable people in Russia can see that if the situation is not fundamentally changed, then the scene of the two going their separate ways will not be too far away. As for the problems with Austria-Hungary and Russia in the Balkans, there is no need to say more. Now that they are faced with such a situation, the Russians certainly know that many friends lead to many paths. Faced with the goodwill of the French, Russia naturally followed secretly. As for the future, only God knows. Taking care of the present is the most important thing. Then the Russian foreign minister and the French ambassador discussed the supervision of loan payments and interest rates. Of course, both of them knew that this issue could not be settled in one day. They mostly agreed on the general direction, and the rest would arrange for people they trusted to take over the next steps. It was almost evening before Ambassador Rivera came out, but the waiting carriage was still here. Set off, Rivera got on the bus and was in a good mood, humming a hometown tune, and the carriage immediately began to return. But what Rivera didn't expect was that a pair of eyes not far away were watching all this. From the time Rivera arrived until he left. After the carriage went away, these eyes still did not leave and continued to observe this place. After a while, Gorkakov, the foreign minister, also boarded the carriage and left. Only then did the eyes behind the curtain retract. After a while, a middle-aged man wearing a windbreaker and a sun hood came out. He got on a public carriage and sat down quietly. He changed 5 carriages on the way, and after the journey covered most of St. Petersburg, he finally got off the carriage in the port area. Walking in the port area facing the sea breeze and the smell of fish, he twisted and turned in the alleys. After making sure that no one was following him, he plunged into a shabby tavern called the Old Sailor. There was no one in the pub, so he came to the bar and spoke to the bartender. Have a cup of water, chestnuts. I don't have Mara here. There's Foucault's vodka. I want Mayla. After a while of whispering, the bartender opened a hidden door and let him in. After passing through a small patio, he came to a room on the 2nd floor. It's Nighthawk. Is there anything important you need to report? In the messy room, an old man with white hair looked at the visitor and asked, Fox, this is what I discovered today. The man took out a letter from his pocket and threw it on the table. As the man moved, a photo was revealed. It was the photo of Rivera stepping out of the carriage. The French ambassador did not expect that his actions would be discovered. The old man named Fox put on his glasses and looked at the photos and the letter with a serious expression. The photo shows not only the French ambassador, but also Russian Foreign Minister Gorkakov getting on and off the carriage. I know about this, and I will send the news back to Berlin as soon as possible, but before that we need to know what the two talked about. This task is a bit difficult. I don't know if they will still be here next time we meet. The man presented the difficulty. It doesn't matter, I will arrange for someone to assist you, and I can also give you an additional grant of funds. Then, let me try, but I can't guarantee the result. You also know the difficulty of the task. The old man smiled. No problem, I believe in Nighthawk's abilities. The man closed the door and left. Ding. Ding ding. The old man rang the bell and called someone. Send this letter to the embassy immediately and have it sent back to Berlin via diplomatic letter as soon as possible. Clear. The room fell silent again. Chapter 50. A day in the life of the Prime Minister. Please collect and recommend. As France and Germany engaged in intrigues over Russia, Italy's drought finally ended. The number of people affected by the disaster reached nearly 9 million, with direct economic losses of 217 million lire and indirect losses of 641 million lire, which severely damaged the vitality of the Italian economy. At the same time, the number of immigrants in Italy has exceeded 300,000, and it is expected that more than 400,000 people will go to sea to make a living by boat this year. With such a large-scale overseas immigration wave, one can only imagine the intensity of the disaster in Italy. The government is basically powerless to do this. because it only has so much money, and it can only prioritize ensuring that everyone does not starve to death. As for those who are insolvent and bankrupt and seek another victory, the government really cannot control them. This year can also be considered a disaster year for Italy. Not to mention Tunisia, which has been planned for a long time. It also encountered such a severe drought. The ability to survive it is considered a feat of Prime Minister Desperatus. So after the disaster relief work came to an end, many people became more aware of the new Prime Minister. He is rightly praised by public opinion, but most newspapers are quite honest and just call him the best Prime Minister in the past 10 years. Some shameless newspapers directly compared it to Cavour's existence, and they were not afraid of the wind blowing their tongues. No matter what the outside world says, Desperatus, the person involved, has not changed at all, at least not in front of others. Recently, after solving the drought problem, he began to prepare for his visit to Germany. Of course, he also paid a little attention to the news that France was going to visit Russia. However, he only pays attention to the news in France at most, mainly to cooperate with the visit to Germany. Usopp, bring the news about the French. Okay, Your Excellency. As a secretary, Usopp immediately handed over the recently compiled documents. This is the latest intelligence sent back from France. Desperatus took the file and opened it to see some of the latest news from France. For example, French Prime Minister João Ferry said that France's economic growth is good and that everyone does not have to worry about it. This is the French Prime Minister's encouragement for the economy. Next article. French diplomat Gambetta said that France still plays a pivotal role in Europe and will remain one of the leaders in Europe in the future. BNP Paribas stated that the bank is expanding its business and has new growth points. The majority of investors should not be misled by hearsay. The Anand dynasty wreaked havoc on our Catholics in its territory, and 19 Catholics, including our French priest Father Manred Dunaoc, were killed. France will not let this evil dynasty go, and they will definitely pay the price. This news may be France's next move, but it has nothing to do with Italy. Then Desperatus read some other news one after another. But on the surface, many of these news are reported in newspapers, but oftentimes, intelligence is hidden within these reports. For example, the BNP Paribas report clearly shows that the bank is trying to appease investors, but there are still many things that can be seen. The first is to find new profit growth points. As long as you check the recent activities of BNP Paribas personnel, you can roughly deduce where its profits come from. As it happened, the Italian ambassador in St. Petersburg sent a telegram to the country, informing the Bank of Paris that it had been active here recently. Then combined with the news that France is about to visit Russia, it can be inferred that the two countries should have just reached a lone point at that time. This was also Italy's latest focus on France and Russia, so this inference could be made. Of course, this can only be used as inference and not as evidence. However, sometimes inference is more effective than evidence because it does not require real evidence, but it can be roughly guessed as a basis. Desperatus believes that France and Russia have hooked up, which is good news for Italy. It can make the visit to Germany smoother and maybe even achieve a good result. However, as the Prime Minister of Italy, Desperatus cannot only focus on foreign countries. Domestic affairs are the focus of attention. Of course, he would not forget this. After reading the latest news in France, Desperatus began to deal with domestic political affairs. The first thing that caught his eye was the plan for Milan's industry. At present, Milan is one of the few large cities in Italy with a very high industrial level. The city's textile, printing and dyeing, and garment manufacturing are also famous in Europe. Although it does not yet have the reputation of being a fashion capital, it has already taken shape. This plan is to deepen Milan's advantages in this field and build Milan into a plan for Italian light industry. Desperatus carefully read the plan and then drew a cross on the plan. The plan was killed. The reason that made Desperatus kill the plan was not that it was a bad plan. If Desperatus were the mayor of Milan, he would have approved it without hesitation, but unfortunately he was the Prime Minister of Italy. Since he is the Prime Minister of Italy, he needs to consider the overall situation. Industrialization in the north is currently booming, but in southern Italy, it is still an agricultural society. Unbalanced development is prone to problems, and Italy already has this problem. The North-South confrontation is already very serious, so it is impossible for the government to continue to provide policy and financial support to the North Point if the South, such as Palermo, Naples and other regions, come up with such a plan. He will immediately approve it without saying a word. Even if the plan is almost different, it doesn't matter, just let it be improved point. But unfortunately, what should I say about the South? If we want to accelerate the industrialization of the South, we first need to take big action against its officials. But at present, Depretis does not have the prestige or opportunity to take action against him. These are all problems left over from the unification of Italy, because due to the urgent need for unification, the landed aristocracy did not receive major changes. The population and land were restricted by the nobility. According to later generations, it failed to liberate the productivity of the South Point. Since productivity has not been liberated, the funds invested in the South will achieve twice the result with half the effort. In addition, a large proportion of Italy's fiscal revenue comes from the North, and the government does not have the organizational and coordination capabilities of later dynasties, so it is impossible to infinitely tilt its financial resources to the South Point. Therefore, the gap between the North and the South has not changed yet, but is suspected of widening. Depretis is not the first prime minister to worry about the gap between the North and the South. In fact, starting from the first Italian Prime Minister Cavour, every prime minister has faced this problem. Not to mention the cultural, language and other differences between the two. Sometimes it feels like two countries without borders, but problems always need to be solved, and Depretis has his own patience. To chapters today. I hope everyone is satisfied. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.